Chapter 346. Guest Deacon Xiao Fengru of Westbrook Lin. Guest Deacon Chang Ziheng of Floating Cloud Lin. Guest Deacon Shizhan of Flying Peak Lin. Deacon Lin Dahong of Northlight Lin. Lin Zhong handed over a visiting card with the names of the people who came to Heart Cleansing Peak this time. Interesting. At a glance, Lin Sun saw some subtleties from the list. 3 branches of Westbrook Lin, Floating Cloud Lin and Flying Peak Lin sent 3 guest deacons. Although they seemed to have a high status, they were outsiders, after all. Northlight Lin was the only one who sent a real member of the Lin family. From this point alone, many things could be seen. These 3 branches send outsiders to visit together. Do they think I'm not qualified to let them send important clansmen? Lin Sun thought. Then he asked, Grandad Zhong, what do you think? Lin Zhong looked solemn. They come with bad intentions. Lin Sun nodded and said coldly, Grandad Zhong, go and call Zhu Laosan. If these visitors come to make trouble, we can take this opportunity to see how capable Zhu Laosan is. Lin Zhong was stunned for a moment before he nodded and left to carry out the order. On the first floor of Heart Cleansing Hall. It was noon. Lin Sun sat quietly in the main seat in the center, thinking about one thing. Vulture had left with young Ku yesterday, but he hadn't come back yet. Could it be that something went wrong when he was recruiting experts? Young master, it's past noon. Lin Zhong, who was next to him, reminded. Lin Sun said with a smile, Grandad Zhong, they are testing my patience. Of course, they may do it on purpose. Anyway, I'm looking forward to their coming this time. With a smile on his lips and a calm voice, there was no smile in his deep black eyes. Anyone could tell that Lin Sun was being ironic. By the way, Zhu Laosan, what's your real name? Lin Sun turned his head and looked at Zhu Laosan standing on the other side. I don't have a name. Zhu Laosan answered in a muffled voice. He was tall and strong, with messy hair and slightly closed eyes. He stood there silently like a sculpture. Lin Sun didn't say anything more. Zhu Laosan was this kind of person. He was as silent as a piece of iron. If Zhu Laosan asked more questions, he would ask for a rebuff. As time went by, noon had passed for a long time. Lin Sun remained calm, but Lin Zhong beside him gradually frowned. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps came from outside the hall. My apologies. I was delayed by some matters on the way. I've kept you waiting. Before the man arrived, an apologetic voice sounded. Lin Sun raised his head and saw a well-dressed, obese middle-aged man coming in. Young master, this is Lin Dahong. According to the seniority of the clan, he is young master's uncle. Lin Zhong explained in a low voice. Lin Sun sat there, looked at Lin Dahong, and said, Please sit down. Lin Dahong, however, did not sit down. Instead, he cupped his fists in shame and said, I really shouldn't have come late this time. Originally, the 4 of us agreed to come together, but who would have thought that the representatives of the 3 families were all delayed by important matters. I couldn't wait for them, so I came alone. His attitude seemed to be very sincere, which surprised Lin Sun a little. His expression eased a lot. At least Lin Dahong didn't show any bad attitude for the time being. In addition, it was clearly stated in the letter that Lin Dahong was the only member of Lin family among the representatives of the 4 branches of Lin family, which changed Lin Sun's attitude towards Northlight Lin imperceptibly. You've been delayed by important matters? I think they deliberately put on airs and wanted to take this opportunity to show their power to me. Lin Sun said calmly. Lin Dahong just smiled and didn't answer. Please sit down. Lin Sun took a deep look at Lin Dahong and invited him to sit down again. Lin Dahong smiled and cupped his hands in obeisance. Thank you very much. He picked a seat at random and sat down. Then he looked at Lin Sun, who was sitting in the central seat. Young master, shall we start to discuss business? Lin Zhong asked in a low voice. Wait. Lin Sun waved his hand and said, Isn't it too boring without the representatives of the other 3 branches of Lin family? Lin Dahong's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. He didn't say much since he sat there. It seemed that Lin Sun didn't want to speak first, which made the atmosphere in the hall still very dull. Not long after, there was a conversation outside the hall. It's been more than 10 years. I didn't expect that heart-cleansing peak has been barren like this. It's really sad. Who can we blame for this? If our 3 branches didn't move away from heart-cleansing peak, how could such a peerless treasure place become like this? Brother, sure, don't sigh. Maybe it won't be long before our 3 branches can move back to heart-cleansing peak again. The unbridled chatter was ear-piercing in the silent atmosphere. Hearing these conversations, Lin Dahong looked at Lin Sun for the first time, as if to see Lin Sun's reaction. But Lin Sun just sat there, motionless like a bell. His expression was as indifferent as before, and there was even a faint smile on his lips. Lin Dahong couldn't help but be surprised. This young man seemed to be different from what he imagined. Before coming to heart-cleansing peak this time, Lin Dahong also heard some things about Lin Sun. For example, Lin Sun beat a group of young descendants of Westbrook Lin on the first night after returning to heart-cleansing peak. He also heard that Lin Yingzhen, the leader of the young generation of Westbrook Lin, was stripped naked by Lin Sun and made a fool of himself in public when he came to seek justice. Originally, Lin Dahong thought that Lin Sun was a violent and impatient young man. But after seeing Lin Sun's behavior at this time, he found that his previous speculation was wrong. Interesting. Lin Dahong had a strange feeling in his heart. With a noisy conversation, 2 men and a woman had swaggered into heart-cleansing hall. The man was dressed in brocade clothes and the woman was dressed in exquisite makeup. As soon as they came in, they stopped talking and looked at Lin Sun, who was sitting in the main seat in the center. Seeing that he was just a delicate and thin teenager, their eyes revealed a touch of contempt without concealment. Immediately, the woman said directly, "Are you the wild boy who came out of nowhere?" She wore a white dress and her long hair was in a bun. She was elegant, but her words were extremely mean and aggressive. As soon as she entered the hall, she humiliated Lin Sun in front of his face. She didn't come to visit but to make trouble. This woman was Xiao Fengru, a guest deacon from Westbrook Lin. Lin Zhong's face suddenly darkened. But before he spoke, another man said with a smile, "Fengru, don't be angry with a young man. We are here for business." This man was tall and thin with a pair of triangular eyes. His name was Shizhan from Flying Peak Lin. "Yes, don't waste time. Everyone's time is precious. It's better to solve the business now." Another man nodded in agreement. This man looked cold and arrogant, and his voice was soft like a poisonous snake. His name was Chang Ziheng from Floating Peak Lin. "Well, let's get down to business." Xiao Fengru agreed. After they entered the hall, they didn't put Lin Sun in their eyes from beginning to end. They didn't even ask Lin Sun's opinion when they talked. They didn't even give Lin Sun a chance to interrupt. People who didn't know would think that they were the masters of heart-cleansing peak and Lin Sun was a nuisance waiting for trial. This made Lin Zhong look gloomy. He was about to say something, but Lin Sun stopped him with a smile and said, "Let them continue." Lin Dahong, who had been sitting there and watching coldly, suddenly felt an indescribable chill in his heart. This young man was so calm that it was terrible. Lin Dahong asked himself if he was so ridiculed and despised. After all, strictly speaking, if Lin Sun was really Lin Wenjing's flesh and blood, Lin Sun was indeed the only candidate to inherit heart-cleansing peak in name. Of course, this was in name. But in any case, compared with Lin Sun, Xiao Fengru, Chang Ziheng and Shizhan were all outsiders. They were not clansmen of Lin family at all, but just guests of Lin family. This was too much. Even if they were against Lin Sun, they didn't need to let a few outsiders humiliate him, right? Lin Dahong immediately judged that the reason why the 3 branches of Westbrook Lin, Floating Cloud Lin and Flying Peak Lin sent these 3 representatives was obviously to make trouble. Just as Lin Dahong was thinking about it, Xiao Fengru suddenly sneered after hearing Lin's words. Boy, don't put on an act in front of us. If you cooperate with us obediently, we won't embarrass you. But if you don't cooperate, don't blame us for being impolite. Lin Sun asked with a smile. How should I cooperate? Xiao Fengru frowned. Lin Sun could still laugh at this time, which made her inexplicably disgusted and annoyed. It's very simple. We have discussed that we will move back to Heart Cleansing Peak from tomorrow. At the same time, we will be fully responsible for all the affairs of Heart Cleansing Peak. Xiao Fengru directly told the real intention. This was an absolute strength. Lin Sun didn't want to talk nonsense at all. The decision had been made. All Lin Sun had to do was to obey. Of course, given that you are a member of Lin family, as long as you accept all the arrangements with peace of mind, we will not embarrass you. We will allow you to stay on Heart Cleansing Peak and give you certain treatment. I guarantee that you won't worry about food and drink in your life. Xiao Fengru raised her chin arrogantly, like a queen issuing orders. This condition is very favorable. I don't expect you to be grateful. I just hope you remember that Heart Cleansing Peak can't allow a little guy like you to meddle in it. Lin Zhong was so angry that he trembled all over. These words were not only impolite, but also a naked threat and humiliation. What did they think of the young master? What did they think of the direct bloodline of Lin family? The most abominable thing was that these extremely humiliating words were said by an outsider, which was so vicious. Lin Sun couldn't help narrowing his eyes at this time. Just when Lin Dahong thought that Lin Sun had reached the limit of endurance and was ready to fight back, Lin Sun suddenly smiled and looked at him. Do you think so too? Lin Sun's words made Lin Dahong's heart tighten suddenly and his face changed slightly. P.S. I just came back from the provincial capital in the evening. After 2 days of busy meetings, I felt like collapsing when I got home to relax. I really wanted to sleep. Chapter 347. Lin Sun caught the change of Lin Dahong's expression, and he had a vague answer in his heart. He didn't press Lin Dahong any further. It was obviously impossible for Lin Dahong to state his stance right now. On the contrary, Lin Dahong's current attitude was relatively good. At least it represented that Northlight Lin didn't form a unified opinion with the other 3 families. Young man, don't waste any more time. We don't have the patience to waste time with you. Xiao Fengru snorted. If you are smart, you should know that the conditions we offer are generous enough. I advise you not to do anything stupid. Shi Zhan was expressionless. Little friend, if you agree to this condition, please sign your name on this contract. On the other side, Chang Ziheng flicked his fingertips and threw a page of the contract at Lin Sun's feet. He grabbed a handful of money and threw it to a beggar. His action was extremely humiliating. How dare you? Lin Zhong was so angry that he couldn't help shouting, What's with your attitude? Old man Zhong, you are just a watchdog. How dare you speak here? Xiao Fengru disdained. Don't make trouble. For the sake of guarding Heart Cleansing Peak for Lin family for many years, we may reward you with more bones when we move back. Chang Ziheng sneered. Shi Zhan directly said with a murderous look, If you dare to talk nonsense again, I'll kill you. Lin Sun narrowed his eyes and couldn't help looking at Lin Zhong. Lin Zhong's face changed sharply, blue veins stood out on his forehead and his face turned red with anger. Unexpectedly, Lin Zhong didn't go berserk in the end, but his face became extremely gloomy with indescribable loneliness and bitterness. Lin Sun sighed in his heart. Why did Xin Jingluan, who was famous in the Forbidden City 60 years ago, become like this? Seeing this scene, Xiao Fengru, Chang Ziheng and Shi Zhan looked more and more complacent. Hey, I didn't expect this old servant could bear it. This is what a qualified watchdog should be. Hearing these vicious words, Lin Dahong's heart twitched in the distance, and his expression became extremely strange. It seemed to be regret and indignation. Kid, I'll ask you one last time. Do you agree or not? Suddenly, Xiao Fengru seemed to be impatient, and she spoke coldly and aggressively. Shi Zhan and Chang Ziheng also looked over. The atmosphere in the hall was silent. At Lin Sun's feet, there was a page of the contract. It seemed that as long as he nodded, the storm would end. It was easy to nod, but would Lin really agree? At this moment, Lin Dahong couldn't help but feel nervous and looked at Lin Sun. Time seemed to stop at this moment. On the central seat, Lin Sun, who was already 15 years old this year, had been very calm. Even at this moment, he did not show any emotional fluctuations. That delicate and angular face had a calmness and steadiness that didn't match his age. But in the eyes of Xiao Fengru and the other two, this kind of steadiness and calmness was the result of being forced into a dead end. They even thought complacently that if Lin Sun agreed to sign the contract, it would be a great contribution, and they would definitely get many rewards when they returned. The more they thought about it, the more excited and impatient they became. Seeing that Lin Sun didn't move for a long time, Xiao Fengru couldn't help screaming, "Kid, you!" Before she finished her words, an unforeseen event happened at this moment. Lin Sun suddenly raised his head with a smile on his lips, and then he gently waved his hand. The nod was very simple. The waving was also very simple. But the meaning of the two was completely different. Xiao Fengru, Shi Zhan and Chang Ziheng couldn't help but be stunned. They didn't know what Lin Sun meant by waving his hand. But immediately they were stiff all over, feeling a terrible and unparalleled cold killing intent, which instantly enveloped them. The killing intent was so terrible that it seemed to reach the depths of their hearts, making their blood freeze and their souls tremble. An unprecedented panic and despair rose in their hearts, almost suffocating them. Their faces suddenly changed. Only then did they notice that the man who had been standing on the left side of Lin Sun, who was as majestic as a mountain, had opened his slightly closed eyes. Originally, he was silent like a sculpture, which was easy to be ignored. But the moment he opened his eyes, he was like an ancient fierce beast awakening from a deep sleep, with monstrous killing intent. The terrible killing intent, like thousands of troops and horses, swept out from the mountain of corpses and the sea of blood, making the void collapse and producing a whine. This! A strong man of Tao Insight Realm! What a terrible killing intent! Xiao Fengru, Shi Zhan and Chang Ziheng screamed. According to the information they had inquired, there were only two people on Heart Cleansing Peak, Lin Sun and Lin Zhong. How could they know that the silent and majestic man was a horrible man of Tao Insight Realm? Boom! The killing intent, like a raging torrent of iron armor, hit Xiao Fengru and others fiercely. In just a moment, they felt a stabbing pain in their souls, and their minds almost collapsed, as if they were oppressed by an invisible mountain. Immediately there was a series of muffled thuds. Xiao Fengru and the other two were forced to kneel by the terrifying killing intent. From the beginning to the end, Zhu Laosan just stood there motionlessly. He only opened his eyes and released his killing intent. Lin Dahong, who was sitting on one side and witnessing all this, couldn't help but take a breath of cold air. His scalp was numb. 3 practitioners of Sea Spirit Realm were forced to kneel down by his killing intent alone? It was horrible. Lin Dahong had seen the means of a strong man of Tao Insight Realm, but compared with Zhu Laosan in front of him, he was too weak. The substantial killing intent was perfectly controlled and controlled at will. Even in the Tao Insight Realm, few people could do this. Where did Lin Sun invite such a strong man? Lin Dahong was shocked. Lin Sun couldn't help but be surprised at this time. Originally, he invited Zhu Laosan to come here to test Zhu Laosan's ability. But he didn't expect that Zhu Laosan could force Xiao Fengru and others to kneel down to the ground with his killing intent alone. They didn't even have a chance to resist from beginning to end. How could Lin Sun not be shocked by such a shocking means? Tao Insight Realm. And he was a strong man of Tao Insight Realm who fought on the battlefield all year round and killed his way out of the mountains of corpses and seas of blood. All this made Lin Sun finally deeply know how terrible Zhu Laosan's foundation was. Almost at the same time, Lin Sun was also keenly aware that at the moment when Zhu Laosan released his killing intent, Lin Zhong's body tightened imperceptibly, just like the instinctive reaction of a lion when it perceived danger. It seemed that Lin Zhong was wary of Zhu Laosan. However, when he saw that Zhu Laosan's killing intent only shrouded Xiao Fengru and others, and Lin Sun was not disturbed, Lin Zhong obviously relaxed a lot, but his body was still tightened. Lin Sun, who had been extremely rich in combat experience, could keenly capture this imperceptible detail. "Damn it! Little thing, how dare you fight against us? Don't you want to live? Don't think that you can be lawless with the help of a strong man of Tao Insight Realm. You are playing with fire." On the ground, Xiao Fengru, Shi Zhan and Chang Ziheng looked shocked and angry and roared again and again. They were forced to kneel down, which made them extremely ashamed and angry. They didn't believe that Lin Sun dared to kill them. Because of this, even if they were forced to kneel down at the moment, their attitude was still extremely arrogant. Lin Sun got up with a smile and ordered casually, "Zhu Laosan, you watch them carefully. Whoever dares to stand up, kill him first without my consent." Zhu Laosan nodded silently. Xiao Fengru and others changed their faces again. Did this guy really dare to kill them? Just when they were in doubt, Lin Sun had already walked forward. He bent down slightly, looked at the three people kneeling on the ground, and said, "I made an appointment to visit you at noon, but you deliberately came late to challenge my patience. This is the first crime. When you entered the hall, you didn't bow to me. Instead, you humiliated me with vicious words. From the beginning to the end, you didn't restrain yourself. This is the second crime." Hearing Lin Sun's detailed account of the previous conflicts, Xiao Fengru and others secretly breathed a sigh of relief and sneered in their hearts. What a naive young man! Was he going to convict them? What a joke! They came from the collateral forces of Lin family. Even if they were punished, it was not his turn to punish them. In their opinion, the more Lin Sun talked about these bullshit reasons, the more it proved that Lin Sun dared not to attack them unscrupulously. They thought bitterly that they must give this little thing an unforgettable lesson when they had a chance in the future. Lin Sun said to himself, "As the head of Heart-Cleansing Peak and the only heir of Lin family, you offended me by forcing me to give up the power of the clan and sign an agreement to betray our ancestors. This is the third crime. Humiliating Grandad Zhong with a bad attitude and domineering behavior is the fourth crime. As a guest of the collateral branch of Lin family, you repeatedly provoked and trampled on my dignity. You ignored the rules of the clan. This is the fifth crime." Speaking of this, the smile on Lin Sun's lips disappeared, and there was a touch of indifference and coldness in his deep black eyes. He said softly word by word, "No matter which crime you commit, I have enough reasons to kill all of you." Xiao Fengru and others had been suppressed to kneel on the ground, but Lin Sun didn't take the opportunity to humiliate and fight back, nor did he retaliate by cruel means. He was calm as if he would never be angry, which was very abnormal. But when he witnessed all this, Lin Dahong, who was sitting next to him, felt cold all over and felt an unprecedented sense of oppression. He was not afraid of unscrupulous lunatics, but he was afraid of a calm and indifferent pervert. Obviously, Lin Sun was like this in Lin Dahong's mind at the moment. However, Xiao Fengru and others obviously didn't realize this. When they heard all this, they were more and more sure that Lin Sun didn't dare to kill them. Otherwise, why did he need to find so many reasons? Xiao Fengru sneered, "Boy, you talk a lot of nonsense. Kill us immediately if you dare. If you don't, let us go." Chapter 348. Yes, do it if you dare. Shi Zhan and Chang Ziheng, who were kneeling beside him, also sneered, and their eyes were full of resentment. As Sea Spirit Realm practitioners, they were now forced to kneel on the ground, which made them extremely ashamed and resentful. Lin Sun suddenly smiled and said, "You guessed right. I have listed so many reasons, and I really don't intend to kill you immediately." Hearing this, Xiao Fengru and the other two became more and more fearless, but Lin Sun's next words made them change their expressions as if they were struck by lightning. "But you can avoid death, but you can't escape punishment. It's enough to abolish your cultivation as a punishment." As soon as these words came out, even Lin Dahong's heart couldn't help but twitch fiercely. It was too cruel. What kind of punishment was this? It was 10 times or 100 times crueler than killing them. If a practitioner lost his cultivation, he would not only become a waste, but also lose the power to survive and all the status and honor he had. This was the most terrible blow. Think about it, if Xiao Fengru and the other three's cultivation were abolished, how could there be a foothold for them in the 3 collateral forces of Lin family? The bigger the force, the crueler the competition within it. As a guest deacon, it was indeed a unique style. But once their cultivation was abolished, their identity, status, and privileges would be deprived one after another. At that time, which big force would support a few waste people? Xiao Fengru and the other two had obviously realized this as well. At this moment, they all had terrified expressions, and they were completely at a loss of what to do. "No. You can't do this. If you do this, you will be an enemy of our 3 families. At that time, your consequences will not be good." Xiao Fengru screamed. "Lin Sun, we didn't mean to embarrass you. We were ordered to do this. You can't blame us for this." Shi Zhan was completely flustered and admitted defeat in a trembling voice. As for Chang Ziheng, he had long been scared to the point that his face had turned pale. He was out of his wits and couldn't even speak. As he looked at their current appearances and compared it to their arrogant attitudes from before, Lin Dahong couldn't help but feel a wisp of relief in his heart. "Fortunately, I've always been watching coldly from the sidelines and didn't directly get mixed into this muddy water." Lin Dahong shuddered and didn't dare to think further. Lin Sun smiled slightly. Looking at the ugly faces of the 3 people on the ground, an unspeakable disgust rose in his heart. "Zhu Laosan, do it." Lin Sun waved his hand. "How dare you? I'll kill you." Xiao Fengru and others completely collapsed. Like crazy, they were about to jump up and threaten Zhu Laosan with Lin Sun so that Zhu Laosan wouldn't shoot the rat for fear of breaking the vases. But before they could make a move, the killing intent that had been firmly enveloping them suddenly grew stronger. Rumble! They felt the bones in their entire bodies almost break, and their entire bodies were fiercely pressed down onto the ground. Not to mention resisting, they couldn't even lift a finger. Immediately, Zhu Laosan, who had been standing silently like a rock, finally moved. With a wave of his sleeve, 3 black rays of light swept out and entered the bodies of Xiao Fengru and the other 2. Puff, puff, puff. Xiao Fengru and the other 2 suddenly turned pale and coughed up blood. At the same time, their momentum was like a punctured rubber ball, quickly dissipating. Just in the blink of an eye, their eyes had become dim and empty. Their skin lost its luster and became dry, as if they were hundreds of years older all of a sudden. This was the result of their cultivation being abolished. Witnessing this scene, Lin Dahong was also stunned and shocked. Lin Sun's previous means had always been mild, which made people suspect that he had no temper. But now Lin Dahong finally understood that Lin Sun was more ruthless and more terrible than he imagined. Xiao Fengru, Shi Zhan and Chang Ziheng seemed to have lost their spirit at this moment. They were sprawled on the ground, looking extremely decadent and bleak. From a high and mighty Xiozhi to a cripple, this kind of blow was not something they could bear. Only when they lost it could they understand the preciousness of having it. Unfortunately, it was over no matter how they understood it. Lin Sun still smiled and said, "Go back and tell your masters that I also give them 2 choices. First, surrender to me voluntarily and spit out all the treasures that were plundered from Heart Cleansing Peak that year. I can let bygones be bygones for the sake of family affection. Second, if they don't want to surrender, I will regard them as traitors of Lin family and treat them as enemies. I will clean up the traitors for Lin family. Lin Sun thought for a while and said calmly, I will give them 3 years to consider this matter. After 3 years, if they can't make a choice, I will make a choice for them. After that, he waved his hand, Grandad Zhong, send them away. Lin Zhong immediately took the order and left Heart Cleansing Hall with the 3 people who were paralyzed on the ground like dead dogs. Lin Sun sat back in his seat and looked at Lin Dahong with a smile. Uncle, after seeing all this, I wonder if you have any ideas? It finally came. Lin Dahong was shocked. He took a deep breath and tried to suppress all kinds of emotions in his heart. He said, I'm just thinking that if you do this, you will completely fall out with the other 3 families. There is no room for maneuver. It seems a little too decisive, isn't it? Lin Sun shrugged and said, I can't help it. I was forced to do so. I'm alone, and the situation is extremely difficult and dangerous, so I can't retreat. Once I retreat, it's tantamount to stepping into death. Immediately, he smiled and said, Of course, uncle, you certainly don't understand this. It's easy to sit on the position of the master of Heart Cleansing Peak, but it's very difficult to keep it. Lin Dahong's mood was complicated. Although he didn't understand Lin Sun's state of mind, he was very sure that Lin Sun was telling the truth. Lin Sun's situation was indeed very dangerous. It was like dancing on the tip of a knife. He faced not only internal problems but also external troubles, hidden in the dark. The identity of the successor of Lin family couldn't change Lin Sun's situation at all. What's more, Lin Sun was still too young, only in his teens. Under such circumstances, the identity of the successor of the Lin family was not an advantage to him. Instead, it was a burden that could crush him at any time. Now that you have decided to do this, why do you give 3 years to consider? Lin Dahong couldn't help but ask. He felt that Lin Sun's words were like telling others that Lin Sun's current power was very weak, and it would take 3 years to accumulate enough power to fight back. So if they wanted to deal with Lin Sun, they should take advantage of the 3 years to deal with him. That was probably what Lin Sun meant. So Lin Dahong felt that Lin Sun's words were very unwise. Even if I don't give a definite time, according to their attitude, they will not tolerate me to continue to control Heart Cleansing Peak in these 3 years. Lin Sun said with a smile, Instead of that, it's better to tell them that I, Lin Sun, only need to hold on for 3 years. At that time, it's my turn to consider whether to help the ancestors of Lin family clean up the family. At the end of his words, there was a touch of decisiveness in his voice. 3 years. Lin Sun was confident that he had the power and capital to unify Lin family. 3 years, Lin Dahong murmured. He didn't know where Lin Sun's confidence came from, but he saw a rare boldness in the young man in front of him. Of course, within these 3 years, my situation is certainly still impossible to change much. It may even become more dangerous than before, but I'm not worried about anything. Lin Sun changed the topic and smiled meaningfully. After all, if I, the only one qualified to inherit Heart Cleansing Peak, die, Heart Cleansing Peak will be completely lost from Lin family. I think this is the result that you 4 families absolutely don't want to see. Lin Dahong's face changed slightly, and he was speechless for a while. Indeed, Heart Cleansing Peak had been vacant for more than 10 years and had never been taken away. The fundamental reason was that the attitude of the imperial family had always been very clear. Only the direct descendants of Lin Daochun had the qualification to inherit Heart Cleansing Peak. Otherwise, how could the 4 branches of Lin family be willing to move away from Heart Cleansing Peak more than 10 years ago? But if Lin Sun really died, the direct descendants of Lin Daochun would completely disappear. At that time, even if the other 4 branches of Lin family wanted to compete for Heart Cleansing Peak, they had to ask the imperial family for permission. Lin Sun stretched out his arm and grabbed a page of contract on the ground, which was left by Xiao Fengru and the other 2. No matter how unfair the conditions listed above are, they don't have the courage to kill me. On the contrary, in order to move back to Heart-Cleansing Peak and take charge of Lin family, the only thing they can do is to put me under house arrest and even avoid my death at all costs. Lin soon carefully put away the contract and said calmly, "In their eyes, this is my only value. I will remember all this firmly." Lin Sun's words were calm, but it made Lin Dahong realize that the attitude of the other three forces today had made Lin Sun bear a grudge in his heart. If one day Lin Sun really had the power to unify Lin family, the other three forces would definitely have a hard time. Thinking of this, Lin Dahong suddenly looked serious and said in a deep voice, "I come on behalf of Northlight Lin this time for a different purpose than the other three." A playful smile appeared on Lin Sun's lips. "Tell me about it." Lin Dahong said frankly, "To tell you the truth, the real purpose of my visit is to see what kind of person you are with my own eyes, and then make the next decision." Lin Sun nodded and said, "It's a very cautious approach, but it's also very wise." Lin Dahong said, "We can't help it. Although we can be sure that you are a direct descendant of Lin family, we can't give a clear attitude when we don't know what kind of person you are." Lin Sun thought in his heart that it was true. In fact, from their visiting cards and Lin Dahong's previous performance, Lin Sun had seen that Northlight Lin's position towards him was indeed different from that of the other three. Although they didn't make a clear statement, they didn't directly intend to abolish him by usurping power, like the other three. That was enough. Lin Sun was confident that as long as Northlight Lin gave him a chance, he could definitely give them a satisfactory answer that they had to surrender. Chapter 349. Lin Sun asked, "Are you satisfied with my opinion, uncle?" Lin Dahong smiled bitterly and said after a while, "I'm not sure. But if I say I'm not satisfied, I'm lying." Lin Sun asked thoughtfully, "What's your plan, uncle?" Lin Dahong said frankly, "There's no doubt that your previous performance has passed my test. I won't hide some things from you anymore." After a pause, he looked solemn and said, "At present, most of the clansmen of Northlight Lin oppose you to inherit the power of Lin family. You must know the reason. You are too young and have no capital. It's hard to convince everyone." Lin Sun nodded. "I understand." Lin Dahong's expression eased a lot and he continued, "But in the end, your ancestor Northlight came forward and decided to give you a chance." Northlight Ancestor. This title represented Lin Baiguang, the fifth brother of Lin Fighting, Lin Sun's grandfather, and the fifth uncle of Lin Wenjing, Lin Sun's father. Although Lin Baiguang had lived in seclusion and handed over the power to his son Lin Huayuan, no one dared to oppose him as long as he spoke. Lin Sun was a little surprised when he learned this. He didn't expect that his fifth granduncle, whom he had never met, would fight for a chance for himself. This made him realize that not all of the four collateral forces of Lin family were opposed to him taking charge of Heart-Cleansing Peak and inheriting the power of Lin family. Just like the attitude shown by Northlight Lin, it was worth paying attention to and fighting for it. "What chance?" Lin Sun asked curiously. Lin Dahong took a deep breath and said, "It's very simple. A month later, please go to Northlight Lin in person and fight with your brother Lin Xiefeng. If you win, Northlight Ancestor will meet you in person. If I lose," speaking of this, Lin Dahong hesitated. Lin Sun narrowed his eyes and said with a smile, "If I lose, I will lose the qualification to be recognized by Northlight Lin, right?" Lin Dahong nodded with a wry smile. "This is the best result that Ancestor Northlight can fight for. Although he is in a high position, he can't ignore the interests of his clansmen." Lin Sun thought, "Although I reject this kind of test very much and I don't think that my qualification to inherit Heart-Cleansing Peak needs to be recognized by others, it seems that I don't know what's good for me if I refuse the fifth granduncle's arrangement." Lin Dahong said excitedly, "So, you've already agreed?" Lin Sun nodded. "I never want to be enemies with all the collateral clansmen. If I can solve the contradiction between us in this way, I will be very happy." Speaking of this, Lin Sun asked, "Who is Lin Xiefeng?" Lin Dahong immediately introduced Lin Xiefeng's identity. It turned out that Lin Xiefeng was the son of Lin Huayuan, the current leader of Northlight Lin. According to seniority, he was Lin Sun's cousin. At the age of 18, Lin Xiefeng was talented and perceptive. When he reached the human gang realm at the age of 16, he condensed the first-class pond of spiritual power, misty rain and landscape, which caused a sensation in Northlight Lin. He was praised as the most dazzling son of the younger generation in Northlight Lin. Now, Lin Xiefeng had reached the Heaven Gang realm, and his strength was more and more unfathomable. At the age of 16, he already had the first-class pond of spiritual power, and at the age of 18, he had reached the Heaven Gang realm. In this way, Lin Xiefeng is really amazing, even not inferior to those trainees who successfully graduated from Bloodthirsty Camp. Lin Sun was lost in thought. He had thought before that since Northlight Lin arranged such an opportunity for him, it would not be so easy for him to pass. But he didn't expect that they would send such a young overmatch like Lin Xiefeng. For Lin Sun, it made him feel relaxed. After all, in Gang Spirit Realm, he was not afraid of anyone now. Lin Dahong said, "I advise you not to be careless. Recently, Xiefeng has been practicing to break through to See Spirit Realm. According to the inference, he will be promoted smoothly in less than 7 days." At that time, Lin Sun's eyes suddenly narrowed. It turned out that Lin Sun's trump card was here. Letting a top figure of the young generation who had just broken through to See Spirit Realm deal with him? This feeling was a little like bullying. The difference between See Spirit Realm and Earthgang Realm was not as simple as 2 realms, but a whole big realm. Most importantly, practitioners of See Spirit Realm could fly in the air and summon wind and rain. They could not only hurt people in the air, but also control the momentum of the world. But practitioners of Earthgang Realm lost a lot in the congenital aspect. Seeing that Lin Sun was silent, Lin Dahong's heart thumped, and he said embarrassedly, "This duel is really a bit difficult, but the ancestor of Northlight Lin said that it is not so easy to inherit the power of the clan. However, I don't mean to embarrass you. As long as you can hold on for more than 100 moves, you will pass." Lin Sun said, "Oh," which made others unable to know what he was thinking. This made Lin Dahong feel more anxious. Even Lin Dahong himself felt that this test was a bit difficult, but there was no other way. This was the attitude of Northlight Lin. Lin Sun suddenly smiled and said, "I have roughly understood it, but there is one last question." Lin Dahong breathed a sigh of relief and said quickly, "Go ahead." Lin Sun said, "Why do we have to wait for a month to start this duel?" Lin Dahong explained patiently, "In 20 days, Xiefeng will participate in the nation test, so we can only postpone it to a month later." Nation test? Lin Sun was shocked. He suddenly remembered that he had been so busy solving all kinds of things these days that he forgot that there were only 20 days left before the nation test. Until Lin Dahong left, Lin Sun sat there alone, thinking about the nation test. Originally, according to his plan when he left Mist City, he would participate in the nation test after entering the Forbidden City. But it was not until he entered the Forbidden City that he found that the plan could never keep up with the changes. From the moment he set foot on Heart Cleansing Peak, he could hardly spare much time for cultivation and rest, let alone for the nation test. It didn't take long for Lin Zhong to return, which made Lin Sun wake up from his meditation. "Grandad Zhong, there is one thing I want you to do in person," Lin Sun said. "Go ahead, young master," Lin Zhong said. Lin Sun took out a pen and paper, wrote a page full of words, and then handed it to Lin Zhong, saying, "Give this to Shiryu, the 3rd young master of Keystone Business, and tell him to spread the content on the paper by any means." Lin Zhong took the paper in his hand, glanced at it inadvertently, and was suddenly shocked. What was written on it was not a shocking secret, but some introduction about Lin Sun himself. The most striking was the line of handwriting, won the first place in the province test of Southwest Province with the cultivation of human gang realm. This was no longer a secret in the Southwest Administrative Province, but to Lin Zhong it was like a bolt of lightning that struck him with an inexhaustible impact. Only now did he know that the young master in front of him had made such a dazzling achievement. The first place in the province test. Among the 34 provinces of the empire, there were only 34 first places in the province test, and his young master was one of them. The most shocking thing was that his young master was only in human gang realm at that time. Then he read down, and the shock in Lin Zhong's heart was soon replaced by a touch of surprise. There was some information about Lin Sun's current situation. When he saw the sentence, suffering from mundane affairs, I have no choice but to give up the nation test, Lin Zhong was stiff all over and showed a touch of anxiety. He couldn't help asking, "Young master, are you really not going to participate in the nation test?" Lin Sun said casually, "I'm struggling now. I don't have the mood and time to pay attention to such things. It's fine if I don't participate." Lin Zhong seemed unwilling to give up and said, "Young master, this is the nation test. Do you want to think about it again?" Lin Sun's attitude was firm and he said, "Grandad Zhong, I'm only 15 years old this year. It doesn't matter if I miss the nation test. It's not too late to take part in it after I settle the affairs of Heart Cleansing Peak." Lin Zhong showed an unspeakable disappointment on his face. He wanted to say something but stopped on second thought. Finally, he sighed and turned away. Watching Lin Zhong leave, Lin Sun couldn't help but sigh. How could he not want to take part in the nation test? But the reality was so cruel that he had to give up. "Zhu Laosan, thank you this time. It's all right now. You can go back to have a rest." Lin Sun suddenly opened his mouth and looked at the majestic man who had been standing like a statue. Zhu Laosan nodded and strode out without saying a word. But when he walked out of the hall, he suddenly said, "It's not necessarily a good thing to persist. It's not necessarily a bad thing to give up." His deep voice echoed in the empty hall, and Zhu Laosan's figure had disappeared. Lin Sun was stunned and suddenly laughed. It turned out that Zhu Laosan was not an extremely dull person. After a long stretch, Lin Sun turned around and walked up to the quiet room on the 3rd floor of the hall. It would take a lot of time and energy to deal with all kinds of things every day. Lin Sun had to seize all the available time to cultivate. What's more, the opponent he would face a month later was a person who was qualified to take part in the nation test and was known as the most dazzling talent of the young generation of Northlight Lin. The most important thing was that this person must have already reached Sea Spirit Realm at that time. Therefore, Lin Sun didn't dare to be careless. Lin Sun picked another wisp of root of snow ginseng and swallowed it. Then he began to meditate with his legs crossed. Soon, his handsome figure was shrouded by wisps of boiling white mist, looming like a dream. At the same time, in Westbrook Lin, the atmosphere in the clan discussion hall was somber and oppressive to the extreme, causing the 2 guards stationed outside the hall to feel suffocated and tremble with fear. Xiao Fengru, Shi Zhan and Chang Ziheng, the 3 guest deacons whose cultivation had been abolished, were kneeling on the ground with pale faces and shivering. Chapter 350. In the depths of the council hall, there were 3 men sitting. They were Lin Tianlong, the ruler of Westbrook Lin, Lin Yenshan, the ruler of Floating Cloud Lin, and Lin Pingdu, the ruler of Flying Peak Lin. Each of these 3 men was a powerful figure in Tao Insight Realm. They were in charge of a branch of Lin clan. They had great power. However, today was a rare occasion for them to gather together, and at this moment, all of their expressions were exactly the same, extremely gloomy. They had learned everything that happened on Heart Cleansing Peak from Xiao Fengru. They didn't expect that the young man refused their proposal. The thing that infuriated them the most was that this young man had crippled the guest deacon they'd sent out. Such arrogant actions were simply an insult to their dignity. A bunch of wastes, get out. Finally, Lin Tianlong, the ruler of Westbrook Lin sitting in the center, opened his mouth. His voice was like thunder, rumbling in the empty hall. Xiao Fengru and the other two suddenly became extremely miserable. They got up from the ground and left in disgrace. Sure enough, after losing their cultivation and becoming a waste, they had no value. It could be foreseen that when they left this council hall, all the status and offerings they had enjoyed in the past would be blown away by the wind and rain. This was Lin Sun's revenge. Although he didn't kill them, it was more cruel than killing them. Looks like this kid is deliberately going against us. Taking a deep breath, Lin Tianlong opened his mouth with a gloomy look. The cold light in his eyes was extremely frightening. He is just a young man. He dares to fight against us recklessly. The ignorant are fearless. On the other side, Lin Yenshan, the ruler of Floating Cloud Lin, snorted coldly. What's your plan? Only Lin Pingdu, the ruler of Flying Peak Lin, seemed quite calm. He said, This young man has the heart-cleansing jade seal and is in charge of heart-cleansing Peak. If he would rather die than hand over the power of the clan, we can't do anything to him. As soon as these words came out, Lin Tianlong and Lin Yenshan looked gloomy again. This was indeed a tricky problem. If they killed Lin Sun, heart-cleansing Peak would be completely taken away by the imperial family. But if they didn't kill him, it would be difficult for them to return to heart-cleansing Peak, and they couldn't take charge of the clan justifiably. Just like now, the three of them were nominally the leaders of the three branches of the Lin family, but they were still leaders, not the patriarchs of the family. This was the difference in name. Sky Dragon, you have always been resourceful. What do you think of this matter? Lin Pingdu looked at Lin Tianlong, who was in the center. If it's just this lad, it's easy to deal with him. But the key is that there's an expert in the Tao Insight realm by his side now. This is a little tricky. Lin Tianlong frowned. Unless we ask one of the ancestors of our three clans to make a move, then perhaps we'll be able to smoothly deal with the experts by that kid's side. But the most troublesome thing is that even if we're able to accomplish that, we'll be helpless if that kid would rather die than submit. The other two immediately fell silent. The most troublesome thing for them was the ownership of heart-cleansing Peak. However, only Lin Sun was qualified to inherit heart-cleansing Peak in the world. Even if they wanted to deal with Lin Sun, they had to be cautious. However, if we can't deal with him openly, we can deal with him in the dark. Suddenly, Lin Tianlong's eyes flashed a ruthless color. I don't believe that he will hide in heart-cleansing Peak all his life. As long as he dares to leave heart-cleansing Peak, we have thousands of ways to control him. Lin Yenshan's eyes brightened. What do you mean? On the other side, Lin Pingdu seemed to understand. He said with a smile, That's a good idea. As long as we can make sure that he doesn't die, it will be enough as long as we can control him and turn him into our puppet. Lin Yenshan understood at this moment, and he seemed to be lost in thought as he said, There are indeed many ways to accomplish this. We can first use poison, kidnap, sneak attack, and so on to control him. After that, we can use some vicious secret techniques to control his body and control his soul. At that time, wouldn't he be an idiot that has lost his self-awareness, have no choice but to obediently listen to our orders? Before he finished his words, Lin Tianlong and Lin Pingdu beside him couldn't help laughing. Immediately, Lin Tianlong looked solemn and said, You two, it's better to keep this matter to the three of us. Don't let others know about it. Lin Yenshan and Lin Pingdu both nodded, of course. They were all in charge of a force. How could they not understand that if this matter was spread out, even if they could control heart-cleansing Peak in the end, their reputation would be greatly damaged? After all, in terms of seniority, they were Lin Sun's elders and relatives in the same clan. It was disgraceful for them to plot against a younger generation as elders. In that case, it's settled. Lin Tianlong said in a deep voice, Next, I hope you two can send your elite forces to deal with this matter as soon as possible. When it's done, it's time for our three forces to return to heart-cleansing Peak. Lin Yenshan and Lin Pingdu agreed at the same time. By the way, Northlight Lin Pingdu suddenly asked. Ignore them. Lin Tianlong's face showed a touch of coldness. At this time, they are still hesitating and unwilling to take a stand. When we return to Heart-Cleansing Peak, they won't take the opportunity to take advantage of us. The night came. The Forbidden City had just begun its bustling period. There were stars in the sky and lights on the ground, shining on the capital. That was the Forbidden City. Whenever the night fell, the lights in the city were burning like fire dragons coiling on the streets and alleys. It was brilliant and dreamy. The night was also the best time to seek pleasure. Talented men and beautiful women, young masters and young ladies, literati and poets, romantic dignitaries, all sorts of figures were either riding treasured carriages, riding beast carriages, or walking slowly. They moved through the bustling streets, and it was extremely bustling. In the center of the Forbidden City, adjacent to Keystone Business, there was a sky-high white jade building. A spiritual light curtain appeared in the night. On the light curtain, a dignified and beautiful woman with outstanding appearance was broadcasting all kinds of things that happened in the Forbidden City. In this nation test, there will be 3,700 top figures of the young generation. At that time, the royal family of the empire will send King Yongling, Zhao Chong, to preside over the assessment in person. This morning, Yin Yen, a monk of Yueluan Kingdom, went to Green Deer School to discuss Taoism. He defeated 13 outstanding students of Green Deer School by himself, which caused a lot of shock and uproar. Young Sword King Shai Yutong has personally issued a letter of challenge to Yin Yen. We will continue to pay attention to what will happen next. The latest news from the front line is that Water Barbarian branch of Voodoo Barbarian tribe suddenly sent a delegation to the Forbidden City 3 months later. The purpose is still unclear. It is said that the royal family of the empire has agreed to this matter. Like the spiritual light curtain in other provincial capitals, the spiritual light curtain in the Forbidden City was also broadcasting the recent hot event. Many practitioners were gathered there, listening, analyzing, and discussing. It was very lively. In the bustling crowd, Vulture was sitting in a wheelchair, and young Ku was pushing him behind. They walked slowly to the distance. Things are almost settled. There are still a lot of 60,000 gold coins left. Why don't you take this opportunity to go around and buy something? You know, after returning to Heart-Cleansing Peak this time, there will be few opportunities to wander around in the future. Vulture said with a smile. He is a pauper now. I can't bear to spend his money. Young Ku said casually. A pauper? I don't think so. The spirit Vulture smiled and chuckled. At this time, the news from the spiritual light curtain in the distance suddenly attracted the attention of Vulture and young Ku. Today, I'm going to introduce a young talent who has won the first place in the province test of Southwest Province of the Empire. His name is Lin Sun. He is talented. What is particularly interesting is that he won the first place in the examination of Southwest Province as a human gang realm practitioner. It's hard to imagine how he did it. Looking at the world, how many people can make such dazzling achievements like him? Before the beautiful woman in the spiritual light curtain finished her words, countless people present were in an uproar and exclamation. They couldn't believe all this. Fuck. Is Lin Sun so crazy? At the age of 14, human gang realm, he won the first place in the province test of Southwest Province? Did I hear it right? Obviously, there are only two possibilities. Either Lin Sun is really a powerful character, or all the practitioners who participated in the province test of Southwest Province are rubbish. Otherwise, how could a teenager win the championship at one stroke? I've heard of Lin Sun's name before. It should be true. Who dares to cheat in the province test? So, it is very likely that Lin Sun will participate in this nation test? That's for sure. How can he miss such an opportunity as the first place in the province test? Even Vulture and young Ku couldn't help but be stunned by the constant discussion. They stopped and listened attentively. Soon, people were shocked by another news broadcasted on the spiritual light curtain. After confirmation, Lin Sun is the direct heir of Lin clan in the Forbidden City. Now he has inherited Heart-Cleansing Peak, one of the 72 peaks of aristocratic clan. It's a pity that Lin Sun has made it clear that he will not participate in the nation test because he is busy with worldly affairs. It can be foreseen that without the genius who won the first place in the province test of Southwest Province, the nation test will undoubtedly lose a big attraction. Hearing this, the Xiozhi present burst into an uproar like a pot exploding. Lin clan? I only remember that there are 4 Lin clans in the Forbidden City, but none of them is qualified to enter Heart-Cleansing Peak. You don't understand. Heart-Cleansing Peak can only be inherited by the direct descendants of Lord Daochen of Lin clan. Don't you know who Lord Daochen is? He is a life-death realm king who saved our empire from the fire and water 500 years ago. Tut-tut, I didn't expect that the first place in the province test of Southwest Province is the direct descendant of Lord Daochen. No wonder he can make such dazzling achievements at such a young age. Hey, a bloody thing happened in Heart-Cleansing Peak more than 10 years ago. Now Lin Sun suddenly returns to the Forbidden City as the direct heir of Lin clan and takes over Heart-Cleansing Peak. It's like jumping into a storm whirlpool. One careless move and he will be crushed. Chapter 351. There was a constant uproar in the field. Everyone's face was full of surprise, shock, emotion, and so on. The reason was very simple. There were too many things worth discussing and deliberating about Lin Sun. In other words, there were too many gimmicks. Some people were attracted by Lin Sun's cultivation and achievements. They thought that Lin Sun himself was a peerless genius as he won the first place in the Southwest Province trial with the cultivation of Human Gang Realm at the age of 10. Some people were also attracted by Lin Sun's identity. No one expected that he was the lineal descendant of Duke Daochen, the life-and-death realm king who had shocked the world 500 years ago. More people were more concerned about Lin Sun's current situation. Although he was the only candidate qualified to inherit Heart-Cleansing Peak, one of the 72 peaks of the aristocratic family, anyone who knew the bloody event more than 10 years ago knew that Lin Sun's situation was not as good as it seemed. On the contrary, Lin Sun would fall into a dangerous and unpredictable storm vortex because of his identity. I don't know who spread the news. It's obvious that it was carefully prepared. Otherwise, it would not cause so much discussion. On the street, young Ku frowned and said, "Judging from the great uproar in the field, Lin Sun's deeds would spread throughout the Forbidden City at an incredible speed after tonight. At that time, no one knew how much uproar and attention it would cause. It might be a good thing or a bad thing for Lin Sun. The news coming out of the spiritual screen every day has been carefully screened. If someone didn't promote it secretly, the news about Lin Sun should not be publicized like this." In the wheelchair, Vulture's clear and calm eyes were surging with wisdom. I even suspect that the news was provided by Lin Sun himself. Young Ku was stunned. "How is it possible?" Vulture smiled and said, "Do you remember when I met Lin Sun for the first time the day before yesterday?" He confidently promised that within a month, everyone in the Forbidden City would know his name. After a pause, he continued, "If you look at the news coming out of the spiritual screen tonight, you can infer that even if Lin Sun didn't do it himself, he must have an inseparable relationship with him." A strange expression appeared in young Ku's clear eyes. If so, doesn't it mean that Lin Sun has more cards in his hand that we don't know? After all, you just said that the news coming out of the spiritual screen is strictly controlled. I'm afraid that Lin Sun can't do it by himself. Vulture nodded and said, "Young Ku, I have to remind you that Lin Sun's background is a bit complicated. He not only entered the bloodthirsty camp, but also had the shadow of the Dark Templar behind him. If that's all, he is the only lineal heir of Lin Sun, but he is also the only lineal heir of Lin family. No one dare to find the reason for his parents' death. What puzzles me most is the attitude of the imperial royal family. Heart-cleansing Peak has been abandoned for more than 10 years, but it has never been taken away. Don't you think it strange? That is one of the 72 peaks of the great clans. Not only is it a paradise, but it also represents a great status and power. Vulture looked at young Ku and said, "Under such circumstances, I'm not sure whether it's good or bad to continue to help Lin soon. And you should also be mentally prepared." Young Ku thought for a moment and nodded. "Of course, this is just my analysis. There are too many secrets hidden in Lin soon. What I noticed may just be the tip of the iceberg. I'm actually looking forward to working with such a mysterious little guy." Spiritual Vulture changed the topic and smiled. "Chances are that he can really bring me a lot of unexpected surprises, or miracles." Young Ku was shocked, and her clear eyes were bright. She said, "If Lin soon knows that you think so highly of him, he must be very happy." Vulture smiled and waved his hand. "Let's go. It's time for us to return." At the moment, young Ku pushed the wheelchair and returned with Vulture. Their figures soon disappeared in the bustling night streets of the Forbidden City. Behind the spiritual curtain, in front of an ancient building. This was the spirit-transmitting department of the Forbidden City, which was in charge of all matters related to the spiritual curtain. At this moment, an extremely luxuriously decorated treasured carriage that was pulled by 4 snow-white cloud-water beasts was parked there silently. Not long after, a graceful figure came out of the gate of the magnificent and ancient building of the Spirit-Transmitting Department. She was dignified and graceful, and her appearance was extremely outstanding. She was the woman who broadcasted the news in the spiritual curtain just now. Seeing her appearance, the chariot parked on one side opened the curtain, revealing Sure Yu's handsome face with red lips and white teeth. "I've done what I've asked you to do. If there's nothing else, I'll go back." The woman stepped forward and said coldly. But Sure Yu grabbed her arm and held her whole body in his arms. He kissed the woman's moist lips and said with a smile, "How can there be nothing else? In order to celebrate your contribution tonight, I'll take you to have a wonderful night." The woman was originally cold, dignified and quiet, but at this time, she suddenly giggled. Her eyes were full of flirtatious charm. "Oh, how wonderful!" With a swish, Sure Yu pulled down the curtain and looked at the woman in his arms affectionately. "You'll know when the time comes." As he said, he bowed his head and kissed the woman's lips. But in his heart, the third child of Keystone Business sighed with emotion. Lin Sun, I sold my body to help you. You must remember this favor." Obviously, the news about Lin Sun broadcasted in the spiritual curtain tonight was promoted by Sure Yu secretly. In the same night, Qi Tsangmei withdrew her eyes from the spiritual curtain and fell into meditation. Lin Sun. It turned out that he was the only lineal heir of heart-cleansing Peak of Lin family. His great-grandfather was Lin Daochen, who was in life-death realm at that time. No wonder the clan was not allowed to send over matches above Gang's spirit realm in the encirclement and suppression against him. Obviously, someone opposed it. Those who opposed it were all forces that had a relationship with Lin family. Qi Tsangmei was even sure that all this must be influenced by Lin Daochen. After all, Lin Daochen was too famous 500 years ago. He turned the tide alone, fought on the battlefield and competed with the king of the Empire of the Dark. Although he died in the end, he successfully saved the Empire from the fire and water and helped the Empire to resolve a terrible disaster. With the great kindness left by Lin Daochen, anyone who wanted to kill his lineal descendants would encounter a lot of resistance. At least in the last action of Qi family, this was fully reflected. For example, they were not allowed to send practitioners above Gang's spirit realm. Another example was that Qi Tsangfeng was stopped by the Old Man of the Dark Night Shrine as soon as he took action. Qi Tsangfeng was punished and was forced to be confined for 3 years. "When I go back, I will kill Qi Zhe." Qi Tsangmei meditated for a long time and suddenly said. The servant who followed her was stunned and immediately nodded. He also heard that Chi Zai's hands were destroyed by Lin Sun in order to rob a woman. He was still recovering in the clan. However, although Chi Zai's surname was Chi, he was not a member of Chi family after all. It was not a big deal to kill him. In addition, warn the clansmen who have contact with Chi Zai that whoever dares to fight for Chi Zai will bear the consequences. Chi Tsangmei added another sentence. This time, the servant was a little uneasy. He hesitated and said, "Miss, isn't it a little too cautious? If outsiders know it, I'm afraid that Chi family is afraid of Lin Sun." Chi Tsangmei said indifferently, "Just do it." The reason why she did this was not that she was afraid of Lin Sun, but that she had been instructed by her father Chi Lingxiao not to take action against Lin Sun for the time being. Chi Tsangmei could probably guess the reason. She just wanted to watch the internal fight between Lin Sun and Lin Sun's collateral clansmen. No matter what the result was, Chi family would not get involved in this muddy water rashly. Not only Chi family but also many aristocratic forces in the Forbidden City had such an attitude. However, Chi Tsangmei always felt that things would not be so simple. It seemed that there was a more terrifying force behind Lin Sun, so that many forces including Chi family dared not take action easily. Of course, this was Chi Tsangmei's own speculation. But anyway, the more mysteries about Lin Sun, the more interested Chi Tsangmei became. The failure of the last action made it impossible for her to swallow it. If there was a chance to retaliate against Lin Sun in the future, Chi Tsangmei would never miss it. Castle of the Night, Miss, since Lin Sun entered the Forbidden City, the old priest in the observatory has been silent and never showed any attitude, so some forces including Chi family dare not take action without authorization. They adopted a wait-and-see attitude. It's normal. Before the situation is clear, no one dares to take action without authorization. Speaking of it, I didn't expect that there was a big shot in the royal family of the Empire who secretly stood up for Lin Sun. I'm not sure which big shot it is. Then continue to check. Yes. What's the current situation of Lin Sun? It's not optimistic. It's not so easy to take charge of Heart Cleansing Peak. It's an opportunity for him to hone himself. I think so too. By the way, have you found out the relationship between Lu Boya and Lin family? Not yet. This is very important. Lu Boya is not a man of the Empire. His identity is quite mysterious, but he is willing to live in the Purple Abyss prison in order to save Lin Sun. This is thought-provoking. I'll pay attention to this matter. Well, you can go now. In the dark hall, the old man turned around and left. On the high bone throne, the Queen of the Night supported her chin with one hand and was lost in thought. Chapter 352. As Vulture and Young Ku expected, the news about Lin Sun spread all over the Forbidden City overnight as if it had wings, setting off countless discussions and uproars. Some busybodies jokingly called Lin Sun the youngest lord of aristocratic family in the Forbidden City. Of course, there was another full of ridicule title, the loneliest lord of aristocratic family in the mountain of aristocratic families. It seemed to be a joke, but the truth behind it was that Lin Sun was really too young. He was only in his teens. Among the many forces in the Forbidden City, he was the only one. There was no one else like him. Moreover, his situation as the successor of the Lin family was too pitiful. He was all alone, had neither money nor manpower, and only had a false reputation. Moreover, his situation was precarious, and he was simply pitiful to the extreme. In a word, the name of Lin Sun resounded in the Forbidden City overnight. His reputation was neither good nor bad, but there were many interesting things about him. Lin Sun didn't know all this. As time went by, it had been 7 days since Lin Sun's closed-door cultivation. In the 7 days, there was no disturbance on Heart Cleansing Peak. All chores and affairs were solved in an orderly manner under the handling of Vulture. On the evening of the 7th day, Lin Zhong went to the 3rd floor of Heart Cleansing Hall as usual. There were many things he needed to report to Lin Sun. But Lin Sun didn't come out for a long time, so Lin Zhong didn't dare to disturb him rashly. The bronze gate was closed as before. Seeing this, Lin Zhong was ready to turn around and leave. Right at this moment, a muffled buzzing sound could be heard, and the tightly shut bronze door had already slowly opened. Lin Zhong was refreshed at once. His young master finally came out. He turned his head and saw Lin Sun walking out. What surprised Lin Zhong was that compared with the past, the young master in front of him had become more transcendent. His black eyes were deep and clear, and his gestures were calm and dignified. Immediately, Lin Zhong reacted and said with joy, "Congratulations to young master for successfully advancing to the heaven realm." Lin Sun smiled and said, "Grandad Zhong, how long have I been in closed-door cultivation?" 7 days. Lin Sun was in a trance. He didn't expect that his cultivation would be overflowing like water when he swallowed the root of the snow infant jade ginseng, while he was in closed-door cultivation this time, and he advanced along with it. Different from the past, Lin Sun was keenly aware that not only his cultivation, but also his body and spiritual power had undergone a comprehensive transformation during this promotion. All of this had caused him to forget the passage of time while he was cultivating. Only now did he suddenly realize that this advancement had actually taken 7 days. But comparatively speaking, the harvest was also huge. First of all, his cultivation base had broken through to the heavenly star border realm, allowing the earth star border energy in his body to perfectly transform into the heavenly star border energy. The density of his earth star border energy was more than double that of before. At the same time, his whole body was further transformed and became more and more powerful. Lin Sun had tested it before and found that ordinary swords and sabers could not scratch his skin at all. In his sea of consciousness, over 10 more soul stars lit up. Presently, there was an entire 72 soul stars flickering in the starry sky of his sea of consciousness, and they emanated clear radiance that nurtured his soul. All this made Lin Sun's spiritual perception improve a lot, and he could perceive all the movements within a radius of 3,000 meters. This was Heaven Gang realm. From the earth to the sky, comprehending the general trend of Qian Kuan, and the atmosphere of the whole sky was no less than a rebirth for practitioners. No matter if it was cultivation, soul, or physique, they were all accumulating power for breaking through to the spirit ocean tier. This was a process of accumulating strength. The more profound the accumulation, the greater the benefit when breaking through to the soul realm. "Young master," Lin Zhong said, "there are a lot of things happened during your closed-door cultivation. I need to report them to you." "Oh, Grandad Zhong, go ahead." Lin Sun walked downstairs. 7 days ago, according to your order, I have contacted Shiryu, the third child of Keystone Business. He has done your thing." Lin Zhong followed Lin Sun. "Done?" Lin Sun was surprised. "Yes, Child Shiryu has already publicized your name through the spiritual transmitting light curtain in the Forbidden City. Now your name is everywhere in the Forbidden City," Lin Zhong explained. Lin Sun smiled. "I didn't expect Shiryu to have such amazing means to be able to use the spiritual screen. This is a big favor." Lin Zhong continued, "Child Shiryu also asked me to tell you that he will hold an auction in 10 days. At that time, he will invite the top forces in the Forbidden City. If you are interested, you can also go there." Lin Sun nodded. "I see. Is there anything else?" Lin Zhong said, "In addition, Mr. Vulture has returned and recruited 3 strong practitioners to work for Heart Cleansing Peak. Mr. Vulture said that you can come and have a look when you finish your closed-door cultivation." Lin Sun was stunned. "Only 3 people?" A strange look appeared on Lin Zhong's face. "Yes, there are 3 of them. However, according to this old servant's observation, none of them are simple." Lin Sun immediately became interested and said, "Let's go and have a look now." Lin Zhong suggested, Young master, you'd better invite Mr. Vulture to come with you. The 3 strong practitioners have a strange temper. Lin Sun nodded. Before long, Lin Sun saw Vulture sitting in a wheelchair, leisurely looking at the wonders of the sea of clouds in the distance. Young Ku was not there. She had been going out early and coming back late these days to help Lin Sun spy on the 4 collateral forces of Lin family. I heard that you have promised to go to Northlight Lin to fight with a young man named Lin Xiefeng? Vulture spoke first when he saw Lin Sun. Yes. Lin Sun nodded. See, Spirit Realm is not so easy to deal with. It's even hard for you to win. So I think your decision this time is a little risky. Vulture pondered. I understand. But as long as I can hold on for 100 moves without being defeated, it's enough. Lin Sun smiled. Since you've already made your decision, then I have nothing else to say. However, I still have to remind you that haste makes waste on the path of cultivation. You must not be too impatient to advance because of a battle. Otherwise, it will be disadvantageous to your cultivation. Vulture reminded. Lin Sun naturally knew this and nodded seriously. Vulture used to be a powerhouse in the Tao Insight realm. Although he was afflicted with the Devil Calamity Powder and his cultivation was almost no different from being crippled, his cultivation experience was still there. Naturally, his words could not be wrong. Thinking of this, Lin Sun suddenly thought of something. He only focused on cultivation and forgot that there were many powerful people on Heart Cleansing Peak now. Young Ku, Vulture, Zhu Laosan, and even Lin Zhong were far ahead of him in cultivation. If he could get their guidance, it would definitely help him avoid many detours. Let's go and meet the 3 old friends. Vulture pushed the wheelchair down the mountain. He was always like this. He could guess many things without asking Lin Sun. He was so wise. Martial arts practice field. It was built on a hillside on the hillside of Heart Cleansing Peak. Covered a very wide area. It was originally a place for Lin family to practice martial art. But in the past 10 years, it had long been deserted, leaving only an empty field with weeds spreading. At this time, there were 3 figures in this martial arts practice field. A skinny man dressed in shabby clothes was lying on a rock in a slovenly manner. He was gulping down wine, and his eyes were blurry from the alcohol. Beside him, there was a tall fat man with a giant hammer on his head. He was sleeping soundly and drooling. Not far from them, there was an old man with gray hair and scars on his face. He looked extremely ferocious, sitting cross-legged with his eyes closed. When Lin Sun arrived, he was slightly stunned to see such a scene. Were these the 3 strong practitioners invited by Vulture? Vulture said with a smile, the one drinking is Ci Shui, the one sleeping is Yang Ling, and the one meditating is Lao Diao. They are all veterans who retired from the frontline battlefield. I spent a lot of effort to invite them. Retired veterans? Lin Sun thought about it and took the initiative to step forward. He cupped his hands and said, I'm Lin Sun. Nice to meet you. As soon as he said this, no one responded. Those who should drink drank, sleep slept, and meditate meditated as if they didn't hear him at all. Or they just ignored Lin Sun. Lin Zhong's heart suddenly jumped. He looked at Lin Sun with some worry, for fear that Lin Sun would lose his temper. Unexpectedly, Lin Sun smiled disapprovingly. He turned to Vulture and said, It seems that it's not easy to get their approval. Vulture said with a smile, It's true. These 3 are so bad-tempered that even I can only invite them back. As for whether they are willing to stay here or not, it depends on your ability. Lin Sun said, I know that the arrogant people are generally like this. Otherwise, how can they highlight their value? This sentence was with a touch of provocation. However, Ci Shui, Yang Ling and Lao Diao still ignored Lin Sun, as if no matter how Lin Sun abused them, they would not respond. Vulture laughed when he heard this. Yes, that's it. Are you confident that you can make them submit? Lin Sun said, How can I make them submit? Vulture said, It's simple. You can use any method. As long as you get their approval, They will definitely bring you unexpected surprises in the future. Lin Sun suddenly laughed. Any method? Vulture was stunned. He seemed to guess something. His lips couldn't help twitching slightly, and he said, "Well, don't go too far." Lin Sun smiled more brilliantly. "Don't worry. They are the masters you invited back with great difficulty. How can I embarrass them too much?" Chapter 353. The dialogue between Lin Sun and Vulture was loud enough for everyone present to hear clearly. But Cai Shui, Yang Ling, who was sleeping, and Old Diao, who was meditating, all of them didn't respond at all as before. This kind of attitude of disregard was extremely arrogant. After all, this was heart-cleansing peak. In any case, it was Lin Sun's territory. But they had to put on this kind of attitude of treating all the heroes in the world as nothing, which could only prove that they were deliberate. They deliberately gave Lin Sun a test. If Lin Sun could get their approval, they would naturally be willing to stay. If they couldn't get their approval, even Vulture couldn't let them stay. Lin Zhong and Young Ku obviously saw this. Lin Zhong was a little worried, while Young Ku was watching the fun with her arms crossed. Only Lin Sun smiled very brightly. He raised his head, looked at the direction of the peak and said aloud, "Zhu Laosan, I'll leave this matter to you. No matter what method you use, I just want them to stay willingly." When Lin Sun said the words, sincerely convinced, he emphasized the tone. "Zhu Laosan?" Young Ku and Vulture were stunned at the same time, and then their expressions became strange. When they returned to Heart-Cleansing Peak a few days ago, they also learned the origin of Zhu Laosan. But they didn't expect that Lin Sun would directly throw this difficult problem to Zhu Laosan. Lin Zhong was stiff all over. He no longer worried about Lin Sun, but began to worry about Cai Shui, Yang Ling and Old Diao. Among the people present, except Lin Sun, only Lin Zhong had seen the horror of Zhu Laosan with his own eyes, so he knew very well that there must be only one way to solve the problem. Fighting. Boom. Lin Sun's voice hadn't finished resounding in the air when a peerlessly mighty and tall figure that was tall like a mountain had appeared in the Dao development field. A terrible murderous spirit spread from Zhu Laosan, which made the air suddenly cry and collapse as if it was about to collapse. In a trance, this place seemed to turn into a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood, and Zhu Laosan was a killing god who conquered the world. So strong. Young Ku and Vulture's pupils shrank at the same time. Looking at the distance, Cai Shui, who was drinking, suddenly shivered and coughed loudly. The snoring Yang Ling was like a startled rabbit, quickly getting up. Old Vulture, who was quietly meditating, suddenly opened its eyes. Its ferocious face, which was full of scars, tightened. In an instant, the three people looked at Zhu Laosan and couldn't ignore everything around them as before. "Do you want to lower your heads on your own, or do you want me to personally press down on your heads?" Zhu Laosan said in a muffled voice, his face expressionless. His beard and hair were unkempt, and he had an incomparably tall and sturdy figure. The bronze-colored muscles on his body were like bulging rocks, and he gave off an oppressive pressure. Cai Shui, Yang Ling and Old Diao were in a daze. It seemed that they didn't expect that Lin Sun would use such a crude and simple way to get their approval. What was the difference between this and cheating? However, Lin Sun didn't feel embarrassed at all. He stepped aside and watched all this with interest, as if it had nothing to do with him. Boom. Seeing that Cai Shui and the others didn't speak, a terrible killing intent gushed out of Zhu Laosan's figure like a tide. It was like a raging storm that changed the sky and the earth. Cai Shui, Yang Ling and Old Diao all changed their faces and finally spoke. "Don't do it first. Friend, it seems that this matter has nothing to do with you, right? Is this how Heart-Cleansing Peak treats its guests?" Zhu Laosan's killing intent was so terrible that it made their hearts tremble. They knew very well that once they started, they would definitely be killed by Zhu Laosan. "Lower your head or not, choose one," Zhu Laosan said indifferently. This made Si Shui and the other two people's faces become ugly. They all looked at Lin Sun and Vulture next to him. Zhu Laosan, don't do it for the time being. Lin Sun's words made Si Shui and the other two people's faces relaxed a lot. Immediately, Lin Sun looked at Vulture with some disappointment and said, Vulture, is this the master you invited back? I don't think so. Before Vulture could speak, Si Shui had already spat disdainfully and said, Boy, you know nothing. How can you judge our ability? Lin Sun raised his eyebrows and said with a smile, How about, let Zhu Laosan continue to come forward and judge in person? Si Shui looked stagnant and said angrily, You dare to threaten us? On the other hand, Yang Ling seemed to be very disappointed and said to Vulture, Does such a person want us to do things for him? He only knows how to oppress people by force. This boy is not honest. Old Diao also said gloomily. Vulture smiled and didn't say much. He wanted to see how Lin Sun would solve the current situation. I treated you with courtesy before, but you ignored me. Now I intend to let Zhu Laosan come forward in exchange for your approval, but you say that I am not honest. Lin Sun sighed helplessly. You three are really difficult to serve. Si Shui snorted coldly. If you want us to do things for you, you should get our approval first, instead of forcing us to bow down by force. If we had known this, we would not have agreed to come here. Lin Sun said with a smile, I see. Then I understand. If you had made it clear earlier, how could there have been such a misunderstanding? Si Shui and the other two people were stunned and speechless. Lin Zhong in the distance suddenly laughed. The young master really didn't play cards according to common sense, but there was no doubt that this method was the most direct and effective. Young Ku also pursed her lips. It seemed that she wanted to laugh, but she held back. At this time, Vulture said, Since it was all a misunderstanding just now, is it time to talk about business? Wait. Si Shui flatly refused and said proudly, If you want to talk about business, let's talk about it after this boy gets my approval. Lin Sun's smile became cold. He looked at Yang Ling and Old Diao. Do you think so too? The two nodded. Lin Sun couldn't help but feel a little annoyed in his heart. These three guys were really stubborn. Si Shui, Vulture seemed to be a little unhappy and frowned. But before he finished his words, he was interrupted by Lin Sun. It doesn't matter. I'd like to hear how to get their approval. He had made up his mind that if these three guys deliberately made things difficult for him, he would drive them away directly. He was here to recruit talents, not to serve them in a subservient manner. Our attitude may be wrong, but the reason why we do this is that we don't want to violate our principles. I think you won't recruit people without principles, right? Si Shui seemed to feel that what he did before was indeed a little too much, so his voice eased a lot. Tell me, what's your condition? Lin Sun said directly. Si Shui's careless look became rare and serious at this moment, with a kind of majestic demeanor faintly. I am a medical cultivator in the battlefield, and I am also an alchemist. I only have one request. If you can provide me with an endless supply of elixirs to satisfy my various needs for alchemy, I will immediately agree to stay here and serve you. Si Shui said solemnly, Of course, you can nod and agree now, but I want to see your sincerity. Medical practitioner in the battlefield. Pharmacist. Lin Sun's black eyes flashed with an imperceptible light. After thinking for a while, he said directly, Although Heart Cleansing Peak is empty now, there are various unique resources here, such as the Spiritual Medicine Garden on the Spiritual Vein, and the Precious Pill Room, the place of refining elixirs inherited by the ancestors of Lin family. After a pause, he said in a powerful voice, I can leave all these to you. Si Shui stared at Lin Sun for a while and said, Well, I promise you for the time being. Just for the time being? Lin Sun frowned. Si Shui said calmly, I don't believe in verbal promises. Everything depends on actual actions. Lin Sun suddenly smiled, took out a spiritual medicine and threw it to Si Shui. This is my sincerity. If you can refine it into an elixir, I promise to provide you with more similar spiritual medicine in the future. Ci Shui hurriedly caught the spiritual medicine. At first, he didn't take it seriously. He thought that Lin Sun didn't believe in his ability even though he seemed to agree happily. Otherwise, how could Lin Sun casually take out a spiritual medicine for refining? Obviously, Lin Sun wanted to test his alchemy level. But when he saw the spiritual medicine thrown by Lin Sun, Ci Shui was stunned as if he was hit by a stick. He was stunned and asked, Is this ambergris grass? The spiritual medicine was about the size of a palm. Its stem was slender and covered with fine scales. Its 9 leaves were bright red and translucent like red jade. It was very bright and gorgeous. Circles of colorful light could be seen faintly spreading from the spiritual medicine, and the air was filled with fragrance. Ambergris grass. This was definitely one of the ancient treasures known as blood-making magic. It couldn't be fake. Ci Shui was in a trance. To an alchemist, being able to see a miraculous medicine like the dragon saliva grass that had been extinct in the market for a long time was indescribably exciting. Young Ku, Vulture, Lin Zhong, Yang Ling and Old Diao had been watching Lin Sun and Ci Shui talking. Originally, they were all thinking about how Lin Sun could convince Ci Shui. But when they saw this scene, they all understood and couldn't help looking at Lin Sun with a strange expression. It was just a ambergris grass, which immediately made Ci Shui lose his composure. Obviously, it was enough to prove Lin Sun's sincerity. At this time, even if Ci Shui was driven away, he would hesitate. After all, what Lin Sun provided was not only a ambergris grass, but also the spiritual medicine garden on the spiritual vein of heart-cleansing peak and the precious pill room inherited by the ancestors of Lin family. In the outside world, not every pharmacist was qualified to enjoy it. After a while, Ci Shui came to his senses and looked at Lin Sun in a different way. He took a deep breath and said seriously, "From now on, I will follow you." As he spoke, he bowed with an unprecedented solemnity. Chapter 354. Ci Shui's surrender made Yang Ling and Old Diao somewhat move. "I'm a spiritual refiner." Yang Ling opened his mouth. Before he finished his words, Lin Sun said with a smile, "There is also a special place for refining spiritual weapons on heart-cleansing peak. Of course, since you are a spiritual refiner, not a spiritual tattooist, your status is more important to me." After a pause, he murmured, "Well, I can meet all your needs as I promised Ci Shui." There was a difference between a spiritual refiner and a spiritual tattooist. A qualified spiritual refiner must be a smelter. He could smelt all kinds of spiritual materials to cast various spiritual weapon embryos. Of course, it was just an embryo. To become a real spiritual weapon, a spiritual tattooist was needed. Generally speaking, the greatest role of a spiritual refiner was not to cast the embryo of a spiritual weapon, but to repair it. This was a very practical means. Spiritual weapons could also be damaged. At this time, a spiritual refiner was needed to help repair it. Although a spiritual refiner didn't know how to inscribe spiritual tattoos, he could repair it according to the original spiritual tattoo pattern in the spiritual weapon. Compared with spiritual tattooist, spiritual refiner and smelter, spiritual tattooist was undoubtedly the most popular. A qualified spiritual tattooist could be a spiritual refiner and a smelter at the same time, just like Lin Sun now. A spiritual refiner could be a smelter at the same time, but he couldn't inscribe spiritual tattoos. Comparatively speaking, he was inferior to a spiritual tattooist. As for a smelter, he was not only inferior to a spiritual tattooist, but also inferior to a spiritual refiner. However, the status of a smelter was also extremely important. Generally speaking, a smelter could smelt not only the materials for refining spiritual weapons, but also the spiritual medicine for refining elixirs. From this point, the value of a smelter was highlighted. In short, if a spiritual refiner was compared to a sword, then a spiritual tattooist was the soul of the sword, and a smelter was the technician who smelted the spiritual materials of the sword. You agreed to all of them? Yang Ling was a little stunned. He hadn't made his own request, but Lin Sun had given a reply that he couldn't refuse. Not bad. Lin Sun nodded and suddenly thought of something. He summoned chirps from his palm and said, "This little guy is my spiritual beast, a born smelting master. He has heaven-rank smashing star golden fire in his body. Chirps can help you when you refine weapons in the future." Chirp chirp Chiochio, whose body was round and soft, opened its innocent black eyes and looked around like a curious baby. Everyone's eyes were filled with astonishment. Shattered star golden flames. How could this adorable little spirit beast be so magical? On the other hand, Yang Ling's entire body trembled as he gasped and said with wild joy, "Shatterstar gold flames? Heavens! This is great." His figure was tall and sturdy and his body was chubby. He looked quite mighty, but at this moment, he was like a child, dancing with joy and grinning from ear to ear. To an armament refiner, if he could have the help of a natural, smelting master, it would be enough to allow him to obtain twice the results with half the effort. Seeing this, Lin Sun knew that he had subdued another helper. He looked at old Diao. This time, before Lin Sun could speak, old Diao said with burning eyes, "I'm different from them. Strictly speaking, I'm a spiritual tattooist who is good at setting up formations." Lin Sun was shocked. A spiritual tattooist who was good at setting up formations. Another rare talent. Spiritual tattooist was a very broad general term. As far as Lin Sun knew, there were many schools in the profession of spiritual tattooist. There were many kinds of refining spiritual weapons. For example, some spiritual tattooists were good at refining combat spiritual weapons, some were good at refining equipment, and some were good at setting up formations. The so-called setting up formations was to set up spiritual tattoos in battleships, fortresses, spiritual veins, gates, mansions, and so on. There were killing arrays, defensive arrays, binding arrays, concealment arrays, and so on. The reason was that spiritual tattoos were so broad and profound that it was difficult for ordinary spiritual tattooists to master them all in their lifetime. In this case, it was undoubtedly the wisest decision to choose the most suitable path for oneself. There was a saying that every profession had its own specialization. In this case, I'll leave all the matters related to the layout of spiritual formations on Heart Cleansing Peak to you. Lin Sun made a quick decision. Of course, if you encounter any problems, you can come to me to communicate with me. Old Diao was stunned and a little suspicious. Communicate with you? He couldn't help but feel a little disappointed. He thought that Lin Sun would give him a surprise like Ci Shui and Yang Ling unexpectedly. He got such a promise. This time, before Lin Sun could explain, Young Ku, who had been watching with her arms crossed, couldn't help saying, "Old Diao, Lin Sun's attainments in spiritual tattoos are beyond your imagination." Not to mention Old Diao, even Ci Shui, Yang Ling, Lin Zhong and others couldn't help but be stunned. They couldn't imagine that Lin Sun was a spiritual tattooist. How old was he? How could Young Ku think that he had unimaginable attainments in spiritual tattoos? Feeling the doubt and surprise in the field, Young Ku looked at Lin Sun with her clear eyes, as if waiting for him to give a reply. After all, some things belonged to Lin Sun's privacy, and she couldn't say it directly. All of a sudden, all eyes looked at Lin Sun, as if waiting for him to give a powerful explanation. After thinking for a while, Lin Sun took out his identity badge certified by the Commune of Spiritual Tattooists and said frankly, "This is a badge of a primary spiritual tattooist." Needless to say, everyone knew that the badge in his hand must be real, and it couldn't be fake at all. But when they heard that Lin Sun was just a primary spiritual tattooist, Ci Shui, Yang Ling and others became disapproving. Old Diao was a senior spiritual tattooist. If he encountered a problem, How could a primary spiritual tattooist be able to solve it? Anyway, it was indeed rare and outstanding for Lin Sun to pass the certification of the Commune of Spiritual Tattooists and become a primary spiritual tattooist at such a young age. Old Diao seemed to have thought it through and said with flagging interest, "Well, I promise you. I just hope," Lin Sun smiled and said, "I won't let you down. The new Ziying battleship launched by the Empire this year was designed by me. I believe you should have heard of its power." A brand new Ziying battleship. It was designed by a young primary spiritual tattooist like Lin Sun. As soon as Lin Sun's words came out, all the people present were shocked. Even Zhu Laosan, who had been standing silently in the distance, seemed to be shocked at this moment and glanced at Lin Sun. "Is that true? I remember that the designer of this new Ziying battleship is old Mo, a spiritual tattooist from the Academy of Spiritual Implements of the Empire. How could it be you?" Old Diao couldn't help asking. The others also had a doubtful look on their faces. It was no wonder that they doubted it. Ziying battleship was a strategic killing weapon of the Empire and the most classic small warship. Since it was developed hundreds of years ago, it had been constantly modified and perfected and had already reached a perfect level. But this year, the new Ziying battleship came out, which broke the usual cognition at one stroke. It was like creating a miracle, which made Ziying battleship, a classic small warship, shine with new power at once. Because of this incident, Old Mo's name became resounding like the sun at high noon. In today's Forbidden City, who didn't know that Old Mo created this miracle by himself? But now, Lin Sun said that this Ziying battleship was designed by him. Who wouldn't doubt it? If it were someone else, he would be furious and scold Lin Sun for being shameless and boastful. I can describe the design diagram of Ziying battleship for you now, and you can also ask Old Mo about it. Lin Sun looked calm and said indifferently, "Strictly speaking, this new Ziying battleship was designed by Old Mo and me together. But after the completion of this battleship, some accidents happened, which made Old Mo bear some unnecessary burdens alone. In the end, he couldn't help but feel a sense of loss in his heart. He remembered the scene when Old Mo was forced to be taken away in the bloodthirsty camp. Originally, Lin Sun didn't intend to mention this matter again, but now his situation was different from before. Now he was the ruler of Heart-Cleansing Peak and the heir of Lin family. He was no longer afraid of exposing this secret and being manipulated by other big shots at will. Even Lin Sun had thought that he would find a chance to go to the headquarters of the Commune of Spiritual Tattooists in the Forbidden City to reprove his identity as a spiritual tattooist. As long as he displayed more means and foundation, he would have a powerful deterrent when dealing with the internal and external troubles that he was currently facing. Is it true? Old Diao looked a bit absent-minded, and the others also looked shocked. They all looked at Young Ku and Vulture. Lin Sun is right. I can testify. Seeing that Lin Sun had admitted it frankly, Young Ku no longer concealed it. She showed a serious look on her beautiful white face and said, "Drill Master Shu Sanchi and I witnessed it with our own eyes. Old Mo was also in the bloodthirsty camp at that time." After that, everyone was shocked and speechless. Lin Sun's impression in their hearts was more mysterious. It was an incredible miracle that a young spiritual tattooist created a brand new Ziying battleship. Among the people present, only Lin Zhong was the most excited. He never thought that his young master was so excellent and extraordinary. A brand new Ziying battleship that shocked the Empire. Who in the world could compare with Lin Sun? The most remarkable thing was that Lin Sun was the first in the province test of the southwest province of the Empire. At such a young age, he had shown a dazzling light. If the Patriarch and the Master knew this, they would be very pleased, right? Lin family of Heart-Cleansing Peak had a successor. Lin Zhong was so excited that he couldn't calm down for a long time. P.S. I strongly recommend this book to you. It's my good friend Yu Ruhua's, The Unique and Unrivaled. I've been following this book for a long time. It's simply too good. Trust me, after you guys read it, you'll definitely come back and like it. Yu's book has just been put on the shelf. I hope you can subscribe to it and let more people know this good book. Chapter 355. Ambergris grass made Ci Shue sincerely convinced. A spirit beast that was born with the shattered star golden fire made Yang Ling ecstatic. But now, because of the new Xing battleship created by Lin Sun, old Diao lost his composure again and again. Young Ku and Vulture couldn't help but feel surprised and shocked that Lin Sun won the test so easily. But for Lin Sun himself, although the test had been successfully completed, he still had many doubts. With excitement, Lin Zhong left with Ci Shue, Yang Ling, and old Diao. He needed to prepare a place for them to practice. Why an alchemist, a spiritual weapon refiner and a spiritual tattooist? Lin Sun found an opportunity to ask the questions in his mind. He had originally thought that the Xiuzhe that Ling Vulture had recruited for him would definitely be extremely powerful, but it was clear that he had misunderstood. At present, they are more useful than practitioners and will help you more. Vulture didn't seem to be surprised and said casually, although Heart Cleansing Peak is just an empty shell and has been abandoned for many years, don't forget that it is one of the 72 peaks of the aristocratic family. It's the top first-class blessed place in the Forbidden City. The spiritual medicine garden here breeds strong spirituality. Precious and valuable spiritual medicine can be planted here. If the refining room here can be fully used, it's enough to refine a lot of elixirs and medicines. The refining place here. Vulture gave an example casually as if he knew Heart Cleansing Peak well. In a word, although it is deserted, it is the foundation laid by your ancestors after all. If you can make full use of it, it will be enough to exchange for endless wealth for you. Lin Sun understood at once. His black eyes were bright and he said, I see. Vulture smiled and said, it's not so simple. When the three of them begin to bring endless wealth to Heart Cleansing Peak, you can use the money in your hand to hire strong practitioners in the Forbidden City to work for you. In the Forbidden City, it's hard to find a grasshopper with 3 legs, but it's easy to hire a group of strong practitioners. Hire? Lin Sun was stunned. That's right. As the successor of the Lin family, you can only hire experts to work for you at the moment. If you want to nurture your own direct descendants, you'll have to spend too much time and effort. It's not something that can be done in a day and night. Vulture analyzed. Most importantly of all, after you take care of the internal problems of the Lin family, you will be able to recruit a batch of descendants of the Lin family as your subordinates and raise them carefully. In such a way, the conflicts within the clan will be resolved, and your position in the clan will be consolidated. That's the most important thing. After all, if your subordinates are all outsiders, when you unify the Lin family in the future, how can the other clansmen tolerate those outsiders telling them what to do? This is the contradiction. As the heir of Lin family, you are responsible for the responsibility and interests of the whole family. If you hand over all the affairs on Heart Cleansing Peak to outsiders, it will be different. Vulture's extensive analysis was like a blow to the head, which made Lin Sun suddenly feel enlightened. If he hadn't been reminded by Vulture, he wouldn't have thought about it. From this point of view, it was by no means easy to become a qualified heir of the clan. Thank you for your advice. Lin Sun thanked him sincerely. Vulture smiled and said, You're welcome. I just want to remind you that Ci Shue, Yang Ling and Old Diao are rare talent. If you can keep them on Heart Cleansing Peak for a lifetime, they can bring unexpected benefits to your Lin family. At this time, young Ku, who had been listening quietly, couldn't help but chuckle and said, It's true. In these years, many forces of the Imperial Army have tried their best to win them over, but they were all rejected. Lin Sun understood and said with a smile, I'll try my best. He couldn't help but have some expectations in his heart. Ci Shue and Old Diao had stayed. When would they give him a surprise? However, before they bring wealth to heart-cleansing Peak, you have an important thing to do. Vulture suddenly said. What's the matter? Spend money. Vulture explained patiently. To plant spiritual medicine, you need to buy spiritual medicine seeds. To refine spiritual medicine, you need to buy spiritual medicine. Even to refine spiritual weapons, you need a lot of spiritual materials. If you let old Diao set up a formation, it will only consume more spiritual materials. All these need a lot of money. Lin Sun's expression stagnated. He sighed with emotion. I really don't know the difficulties of being a leader. In the evening, Lin Sun and Lin Zhong left Heart Cleansing Peak together and went to Keystone business again. After knowing Lin Sun's purpose, Shi Yu immediately lent Lin Sun 300,000 gold coins and gave him a special token of Keystone business. In the future, Lin Sun would receive the highest treatment when he entered Keystone business with this token. He could buy all treasures at the best price. According to Shi Yu, there were no more than 100 people in the Forbidden City who could get this token. Among them were the Imperial Royal Family, aristocratic families, Green Deer School, Imperial Army and other giants. From this, it could be seen how noble this token was. Of course, Shi Yu dared to do so not only because of his identity, but also because of the unparalleled treasures that Lin Sun put in the auction of Keystone business, which was enough for Lin Sun to enjoy this level of treatment. Before leaving Keystone business, Shi Yu suddenly asked about the nation test. Knowing that Lin Sun would not participate in it, Shi Yu felt a little regretful. It was also at this time that Lin Sun learned that Shi Yu had already signed up for the nation test. Not only Shi Yu, but also Ning Meng, by Lingshi, the eldest granddaughter of Jinghai Marquis, Zhao Yin, the great-grandson of Baoang Marquis, Zhang Sunheng, Li Duxing, Qi Kan, Yi Qi, and other young talents who had practiced with him in the bloodthirsty camp would all participate in the nation test. It could be foreseen that this nation test would be a gathering of heavenly talents and overlords. Unfortunately, Lin Sun did not participate. This made Shi Yu feel sorry for him. But he also knew that Lin Sun's current situation was not optimistic, and it was impossible for him to spend more energy on the nation test. Finally, Shi Yu and Lin Sun agreed that after the nation test, they would gather their companions in the bloodthirsty camp and see each other's changes. Lin Sun nodded after thinking for a while. He had a very special feeling for the bloodthirsty camp. It would be great if he could meet those friends at that time. It was late at night when Lin Sun left Keystone business. Lin Zhong drove the chariot in front, and Lin Sun sat in the carriage, meditating with his eyes closed. The chariot was extremely gorgeous. It was the chariot Shi Yu gave to Lin Sun. Originally, Shi Yu intended to give Lin Sun some young maids to serve him, but Lin Sun refused. Now Lin Sun had a big business, but he had no money. There were a lot of things to do. How could he afford to keep a few maids? 300,000 gold coins should be enough for Ci Shui and others to support for a while. Lin Sun sighed in his heart. Money, money, money. He couldn't do without money. When he had a chance to solve the internal problems and unify other collateral branches of Lin's, he might be able to improve this embarrassing situation. But at present, if he wanted to make money, he could only rely on himself. Creak. Suddenly, the chariot stopped, and the friction between the wheels and the ground made a harsh sound. Lin Sun narrowed his eyes and woke up from his meditation. Young master, we are ambushed. Lin Zhong's voice was strange. He seemed to be helpless, but he also seemed to have made a difficult decision. Please wait in the carriage. Let me solve these problems. Whoosh! Lin Sun lifted the curtain of the window of the chariot and saw that they stopped in an empty and spacious street at the moment. There were 4 or 5 figures standing across the street. Especially the old man in the front, whose breath was obscure and awe-inspiring, seemed to be connected with the heaven and earth. He stood there casually, with a terrible momentum that could hold off 10,000 enemies. Tao Insight Realm. Lin Sun was shocked. Who on earth wanted to kill him? Why did they send such a strong man? Looking at the people beside the old man, all of them were full of killing intent and extraordinary momentum. All of them were above sea spirit realm. This shocked Lin Sun again. The power of these 4 or 5 people could not be sent by ordinary forces. Was it Qi family? Before Lin Sun could react, Lin Zhong jumped up with a dazzling long spear in his hand. It was unknown when Lin Zhong held a dazzling long spear which was as silver as snow. Different from the past, Lin Zhong seemed to become another person at this time. He stood upright and his eyes were like lightning. He stood in the air and his clothes were fluttering. A vast and unparalleled aura spread out from his body. His aura was like a tiger that was about to devour the wilderness and howled proudly in all directions. Who could believe that this was an old servant who had been silently guarding Heart-Cleansing Peak for more than 10 years with a humble and honest look? What a great change! Lin Sun's eyes suddenly became bright. Tan White Horse Shen Jingluan. You finally stopped hiding your identity. At this time, Lin Sun finally understood why Lin Zhong exposed his identity. Among the 4 or 5 practitioners who ambushed in the distance, there was a strong man of Tao Insight realm. In such a situation, unless Lin Zhong was not Tan White Horse, he would not sit back and do nothing. Unexpectedly, it's a good thing to meet this ambush tonight. A smile appeared on Lin Sun's lips. There was a cry of surprise in the distance. Obviously, they didn't expect that an old servant who drove the chariot beside Lin Sun would turn into a strong man with unparalleled momentum. Clang! The silver spear made a clear sound like the roar of a dragon and a tiger, shaking the world. Almost at the same time, Lin Zhong crossed the void like a dream and rushed forward with his spear. Chapter 356. Unfortunately, the battle had ended before it had even erupted. After Lin Zhong showed the terrifying cultivation of the Tao Insight realm, the several enemies who had been waiting for him decisively retreated without hesitation. This made Lin Sun a little disappointed. He really wanted to see how powerful Shen Jingluan, who won the 3rd place in the nation test 60 years ago and became famous in the Forbidden City and was praised as Bronze Charming, was. Lin Zhong didn't chase after him, as if he was worried that the enemy would lure him away. When he returned, the silver spear in his hand had already disappeared, and he had regained his stooped figure and honest appearance. Lin Sun opened his mouth to ask something, but Lin Zhong said first, "Young master, I will tell you the reason when there is a chance in the future." Lin Sun didn't give up and said, "Grandad Zhong, if I want to ask you for help in the future, would you like to do it?" Lin Zhong sighed and said with a bitter smile, "Young master, this old servant's duty is to protect your safety. When the time comes, I will take action." Pausing for a moment, he said in a low voice, "Of course, I will not act against any member of the Lin family. This is what I promised master back then." Lin Sun took a deep look at Lin Zhong and said with a smile, "That's enough." After returning to Heart-Cleansing Peak, Lin Sun handed 300,000 gold coins to Vulture and asked him to take charge of this huge sum of money. Lin Sun came to the top of the mountain alone and sat on a rock on the edge of the cliff. In the distance, the sea of clouds surged, and a bright moon hung high in the sky, scattering down its clear radiance. The mountain wind whistled, and the old pine trees at the edge of the cliff swayed. The pine trees rustled, and it was like the sound of nature. Lin Sun was dressed in moon-white clothes, with his black hair tied behind his head at will. His angular and handsome face looked extraordinarily tranquil in the moonlight. In more than 20 days, he would go to Northlight Lin in person to fight with Lin Xiefeng, the famous genius. There was no doubt that he was already in the spiritual ocean tier at that time. The gap was obvious. Even if Lin Sun now had the cultivation of Heavengang realm, he was still a big realm lower than Lin Xiefeng. The difference of a single step was like the difference between heaven and earth. Lin Sun had fought against Qi Tsongfeng, so he knew the power of Sea Spirit realm very well. But this duel was inevitable, and Lin Sun couldn't afford to lose. Therefore, Lin could only focus on improving his strength for the time being and go all out to prepare for this duel. Sitting alone in front of the cold and quiet cliff, Lin pondered for a long time. Finally, he smiled, picked up a pot of wine and drank by himself. From this day on, Lin Sun stayed alone on the top of Heart-Cleansing Peak, watching the sea of clouds in the morning, hugging the clouds to sleep in the evening. From time to time, he would practice with his saber, using ancient trees, old rocks, and waterfalls as targets. His saber would dance among the shadows, floating clouds, and whistling wind. Later on, he sat alone with his saber, like a lonely and motionless cicada, watching the stars in the sky, watching the clouds evaporate, and appreciating the beauty of the mountains and rivers. He sat there for a few days. He didn't care about the weather, didn't avoid the wind and rain, and didn't know day and night. He was muddle-headed, dazed, and indescribable. From time to time, he would have a solemn and dignified appearance as he sat in the lotus position and cultivated silently within. He was unmoving like a mountain as he fused with the heavens and the earth, and he comprehended the aura of the world. This was cultivation. He abandoned worldly distractions, cut off the disturbance of the world of mortals, melted into nature, and controlled his mind to be in harmony with all things. In his eyes there was the great beauty between heaven and earth, the impermanence of the passage of time, the unpredictability of the rising wind and the surging clouds, the rainbow light drawn by the waterfall in the void, the trajectory of the fireflies, and the colorful colors refracted by the morning dew in his heart. There was the aura of the universe, which could accommodate thousands of ravines. The body and mind were in harmony with the heaven and the earth, and the Tao was born out of nothing. What Heaven-Gang realm cultivators comprehended was the majesty of the world. The longitude and latitude of the sky, the picturesque mountains and rivers were all one kind of image. The great sound was silent, and the elephant was invisible. As time went by, Lin Sun was alone as if he was isolated from the world. He meditated, practiced his saber, looked up to the heaven and the earth, observed the mountains and rivers, drank and enjoyed himself, or was in a daze. His beard and hair grew longer, and he looked depressed. His eyebrows were full of weathering. He didn't look like a young man at all, but like a man who had experienced the vicissitudes of life for many years. During this period, no one and nothing disturbed Lin Sun. But in the dark, Lin Zhong, Young Ku, and Vulture were all paying attention to Lin Sun's every move. From the first day, they knew that Lin Sun was cultivating. To be more precise, he was comprehending the Tao. Yes, comprehending the Tao. The Tao of the Tao was very mysterious. When a practitioner cultivated to a certain level, he would begin to touch the world from the inside out and comprehend the power of creation. The essence of Tao that Lin Sun comprehended at the Heaven-Gang realm must be the phenomenon of heaven and earth. Only by perceiving the changes between heaven and earth could he have the powerful means to control the wind and clouds and fly in the sky and the earth when he was promoted to see spirit realm. Young Ku worried that Lin Sun would fall into the shackles of the lower realm if he was anxious to advance. After all, they all knew that Lin Sun would soon fight with a young overmatch of sea spirit realm. They inevitably worried that his cultivation was caused by too much pressure. Vulture was also a little worried at the beginning, but after a few days of quiet observation, he concluded that Lin Sun was not forced by pressure. Even Vulture suspected that Lin Sun had forgotten everything and entered a deep state of selflessness. Lin Zhong also put forward his own opinion that even if Lin Sun could not break through sea spirit realm, he would make progress. In any case, Lin Sun didn't make any mistakes in his cultivation, which made them all feel relieved. Lin Sun was under great pressure and the responsibility he carried was too heavy. Sometimes they thought that even if they were Lin Sun, they could not do better than him. As time went by, there were only 3 days left before the appointment with Northlight Lin. Lin Sun's cultivation still showed no sign of stopping. These days, many sensational events happened in the Forbidden City. For example, Keystone Business held a high-profile auction. The treasures auctioned were all peerless treasures, which caused fierce competition among many top forces. It was said that when the auction was over, these peerless treasures were auctioned at a sky-high price that could make the world crazy. Because of the success of this auction, the reputation of Keystone Business also rose to a higher level, faintly becoming unparalleled in the world. What was most interesting was that this auction was completely managed by the third son of fortune god Sure Yu, who was only a teenager. After this event, Sure Yu's prestige in Keystone Business was greatly increased, and many people in the outside world were optimistic about him. In addition, young Sword King Shai Yutong and Enian from Yueluan Kingdom had a duel in Green Deer School. The final result was a tie. All of a sudden, Enian, the young monk, became the object of attention in the Forbidden City and became famous. As for young Sword King Shai Yutong, after this battle, his reputation was not damaged. On the contrary, because he successfully broke through the realm after the battle, it caused countless exclamations and uproars, which made his reputation rise steadily. Of course, compared with these, the most sensational thing in recent days was the nation test. This nation test could be said to be a gathering of talents and strong practitioners. Since the beginning of the Xiao Flower Festival, thousands of young practitioners who came to participate in the nation test had wonderful duels one after another. Until now, the nation test had come to an end. A total of 100 practitioners successfully passed the test and became the winners of this year's nation test. Among them, the first one was Song Yi, a young talent from Song Clan, one of the 7 top aristocratic families. The second one was Qi Tsongfeng, who also came from Qi Clan, one of the 7 top aristocratic families. The third one was by Lingshi, the eldest granddaughter of Jinghai Marquis of the Empire. She had a high status and was not inferior to Song Yi and Qi Tsongfeng at all. To put it simply, the top 3 positions were completely monopolized by the descendants of the upper echelons of the empire. Everyone couldn't help but sigh with emotion. The fact that the aristocratic clans were able to stand until now showed that their resources and reserves had indeed arrived at an unimaginable level. As for Lin Sun, who didn't participate in the nation test, many people also talked about him. They thought it was a pity that he, the first one in the province test of Southwest Province, had no chance to participate in this nation test. However, this kind of discussion was only sent to a small part of the crowd. Most people still paid attention to the top 3 of the nation test. It was said that on the day of the end of the test, these 3 were not only summoned by the current emperor together with some other practitioners who passed the test, but also directly picked up by Green Deer School when they left the imperial palace. This was a rare honor. Green Deer School was the first school in the empire. Its power was transcendent and it had cultivated many pillars of the empire. But now, Green Deer School took the initiative to recruit Song Yi, Qi Tsongfeng, and Bai Lingshi. Such treatment made many people envious. Of course, Lin Sun didn't know this. When there was only one day left before the appointed time with Northlight Lin, Lin Zhong couldn't help approaching the top of Heart-Cleansing Peak again. As before, Lin Sun still sat cross-legged on the hard stone in front of the cliff. His figure was thin and silent. His body was covered with fallen leaves and dust. His long hair and beard were hanging down. The wind and frost between his eyebrows and eyes were strong, which made him look quite desolate. Should I wake up the young master? Lin Zhong hesitated. Tomorrow, Lin Sun would go to Northlight Lin to fight with Lin Xiefeng. If Lin Sun kept cultivating, he was doomed to break the appointment. This would disrupt the progress of solving the internal trouble. Most importantly, Northlight Lin was different from the other 3 branches of Lin family. They didn't have too much conflict with Lin Sun. If they missed this opportunity, the consequences would be unpredictable. Boom! Suddenly, an indescribable breath emerged and lingered around Lin Sun's body like a hurricane. Lin Zhong was shocked. He saw that Lin Sun, who was sitting cross-legged, had opened his eyes. At this moment, there seemed to be a storm vortex in Lin Sun's deep black eyes, flowing with frightening lightning. Chapter 357. Did the young master break through? Lin Zhong was shocked. But when he observed carefully, he found that Lin Sun didn't have the unique breath of sea spirit realm. This made him a little stunned. At this time, the young master's breath was too strong. His body was like a big abyss with a surging storm. It was not like a Heaven-gang realm practitioner at all. But it seemed that the young master didn't make a breakthrough. What was going on? The storm vortex in his black eyes converged and became deep and calm. The momentum around Lin soon gradually quieted down. He stood up, his elegant figure standing at the edge of the cliff. The mountain wind whistled, blowing his messy long hair. There was a sense of transcendence, as if he was about to ride the wind to rise. Lin Sun took out his saber and cut off his long hair and beard, which looked like weed. Then, he tied his hair behind his head with a silk rope. When Lin Sun looked at him again, his appearance was no different from before. Even the wind and frost between his eyebrows had been replaced by a touch of inner spirit. "Young master, have you made a breakthrough?" Lin Zhong couldn't help asking. Lin Sun was stunned and shook his head with a smile. "Don't worry. I haven't seen enough of the world. I'll break through when I need it." His voice was flat, but there was a kind of absolute calmness and confidence in it. It seemed that for him, breaking through was a trivial matter and not worth mentioning. A strange feeling arose in Lin Zhong's heart. The young master in front of him seemed to be the same as before. But Lin Zhong always felt that the young master seemed to have some kind of transformation in the more than 20 days of closed-door cultivation. He became steadier, more reserved, and even more unfathomable. "Grandad Zhong, tell me what happened during this period." Lin Sun came from the edge of the cliff and walked along the winding mountain path at will. "Young master, a lot of things happened during this period." Lin Zhong hurriedly followed him and introduced casually. When he returned to the study on the second floor of Heart Cleansing Hall, Lin Sun had a general understanding of what happened in the Forbidden City these days. The smooth holding of the Keystone Business Auction was undoubtedly a good thing for Lin Sun. When he went to Keystone Business next time, he could see how much his rare treasures were auctioned. Lin Sun was not interested in the duel between Yin Yen, the monk of Yueluan Kingdom, and Shai Yutong, the young Sword King. But when he heard that Yin Yen could fight with Shai Yutong to a draw, Lin Sun couldn't help feeling surprised. As far as he knew, the Yueluan Kingdom was a small kingdom more than 10,000 miles to the west of the empire. It was known as the Holy Land for monks. In terms of overall national strength, the Yueluan Kingdom was far inferior to the Xiao Empire. In the eyes of most practitioners, the Yueluan Kingdom was just a small place, not worth paying attention to. However, the appearance of this thought undoubtedly proved that there were also extremely outstanding people outside of the empire. What really interested Lin Sun was the nation test that had already come to an end. Lin Sun had met 2 of the top 3 in the nation test, such as Bai Lingshi, the eldest granddaughter of Jinghai Marquis. When he was practicing in the bloodthirsty camp, Lin Sun had already met Bai Lingshi, who was known as the Heaven's favored girl. He even clearly remembered that Bai Lingshi was born with the talent attribute Eternal Starshine. This was a mysterious soul talent that was extremely rare. According to the division of the talent attribute in the Empire, Eternal Starshine could be roughly classified as the 4th level. Although it was just the 4th level, Bai Lingshi had already surpassed most practitioners innately by possessing such a talent attribute. The reason was that there were too few practitioners with the talent attribute in the whole empire. It could be said that it was 1 in a million. Moreover, when Bai Lingshi broke through the human gang realm, she successfully condensed the super 1st level pond of spiritual power. Bai Lingshi only told Lin Sun this secret at that time, so he knew very well how terrible Bai Lingshi's talent and foundation were. But Lin Sun still didn't expect that Bai Lingshi could win the third place in the nation test. There was no doubt that in the 2 years after leaving the bloodthirsty camp, Bai Lingshi's cultivation must have advanced by leaps and bounds and became completely different from the past. Qi Tsongfeng, who ranked second, made Lin Sun frown a little. He remembered that Qi Tsongfeng seemed to be younger than him, but he could actually rank second in the nation test. It could be seen that Qi Tsongfeng did have the capital to be arrogant. Undoubtedly, Song Yi, who ranked first, was the most unfamiliar to Lin Sun. It was hard for him to imagine what kind of peerless talent Song Yi was. It was so shocking that he could completely suppress people like Qi Tsongfeng and Bai Lingshi. Therefore, Lin Sun couldn't help but sigh with emotion that there would never be a shortage of peerless geniuses and talents in the world. It was indeed a great truth that there was always someone better than you. Young master, there is one more thing to tell you. Young Ku has found out that the ambush we encountered when we returned from Keystone business that night should be the action of the 3 collateral forces of Westbrook Lin, Floating Cloud Lin, and Flying Peak Lin. Lin Zhong suddenly said, "The leading expert at the Tao Insight realm is nicknamed Old Devil Chu. He's a notorious old devil in the Empire. He's best at soul-searching and soul-snatching." Lin Sun's eyes narrowed. He thought that the ambush that night was from Qi family, but now it seemed that he still underestimated the despicable power of other collateral forces of Lin family. According to Mr. Vulture's analysis, the 3 collateral forces of Lin family just want to control you by some dirty means and make you a puppet in their hands. By doing this, they will not harm your life, and can let them return to Heart Cleansing Peak and take charge of the power of Lin family. It's really sinister. When Lin Zhong said this, there was a touch of coldness in his voice. Obviously, he was also irritated by such insidious means. So, as long as I leave Heart Cleansing Peak, I may be attacked or ambushed by them at any time? Lin Sun's black eyes were cold. Exactly. Lin Zhong whispered, "Mr. Vulture suggests that you'd better take Zhu Lao-san with you when you go out to avoid any accidents." Lin Sun said thoughtfully, "Grandad Zhong, if I kill some clansman of Lin family, will you stop me?" Lin Zhong was stiff and his face was gloomy. After a long time, he said, "Young master, you are now the master of Heart Cleansing Peak. I will not disobey your will, but please try to restrain yourself. It's not good to kill each other." Lin Sun sneered, "Let's talk about it later." Lin Zhong sighed in his heart. He knew that the 3 collateral forces of Lin family had completely offended Lin Sun. The next morning, Lin Sun left Heart Cleansing Peak, accompanied by Lin Zhong in the chariot given by Shi Yu. It was worth mentioning that it was Zhu Lao-san who drove the chariot. Today was the appointed time with Northlight Lin. Lin Sun would go to Northlight Lin for a duel with Lin Xiefeng. For this trip to Northlight Lin, Lin Sun didn't dare to be careless. The reason why he took Zhu Lao-san and Lin Zhong with him was not only to guard against the ambush from the 3 collateral forces of Westbrook Lin, Floating Cloud Lin, and Flying Peak Lin. More importantly, Lin Sun was not sure whether he would encounter danger in this trip to Northlight Lin. After all, although Northlight Lin's attitude towards him was relatively more kind, who knew whether they would suddenly turn against him? Lin Sun was going to the base camp of Northlight Lin this time. If they suddenly changed their attitude and detained Lin Sun directly, the consequences would be unimaginable. Although the possibility of this happening was very low, Lin Sun had to be on guard against it. Now with Zhu Lao-san and Lin Zhong, who used to be the Bronze Charming, Lin Sun was confident that even if Northlight Lin really had any bad ideas against him, they would not dare to act rashly. "Young master, this is the current information of Lin Xiefeng." Lin Zhong handed a piece of paper to Lin Sun. It was written, "Lin Xiefeng, 18 years old, the son of Lin Huayuan, the leader of Northlight Lin. When he was in Human Gang Realm, he condensed the first-class pond of spiritual power, Misty Rain Landscape. He was known as the most dazzling leader of the younger generation of Northlight Lin. His current cultivation was Sea Spirit Realm. In this year's nation test, Lin Xiefeng successfully passed the examination and ranked 79th, becoming one of the 2 disciples of the 4 collateral forces of Lin family to pass the nation test. Seeing this, Lin Sun was surprised. There is another disciple of Lin family who passed the examination this time besides Lin Xiefeng? Lin Zhong said casually. The other one is the descendant of Floating Cloud Lin. Her name is Lin Qinglan. According to the seniority, she is your cousin. She is the son of Luo Qingshuan this year. She should surpass her master. In other words, Luo Qingshuan was the first in the nation test and Lin Wenjing was the second in the nation test. Lin Sun should at least get the first place in the nation test. Of course, this was Lin Zhong's idea. He didn't dare to talk nonsense, so as not to make Lin Sun feel too much pressure. At this time, Zhu Laosan, who was driving the chariot, suddenly said concisely, "Here we are." Chapter 359. The chariot stopped. When Lin Sun walked down, he saw a towering building standing not far away. There was no doubt that this should be the place where Northlight Lin was located. Lin Zhong stepped forward and informed a servant who was guarding the door of the mansion. Not long after, he saw Lin Dahong's figure rushing out from the depths of the mansion. He smiled and cupped his hands. "Sorry for not welcoming you earlier. Come with me." Then he invited Lin Sun to come in. Lin Sun smiled and walked into the hall. Lin Zhong and Zhu Laosan followed him like a pair of loyal retainers. As soon as Lin Sun walked into the mansion, he heard a squeal like a duck before he had time to look around. "How dare that boy come here? You sure have guts. Where is he?" Before the voice died away, a child in a golden robe with a jade fan in his hand came in. Behind him was a group of men and women who looked aggressive. The golden-robed child saw Lin Sun at a glance and sneered, "Oh, you are Lin Sun. How dare you challenge my brother Xiefeng? You are really arrogant. Is this guy Lin Sun? He doesn't look special. I'm afraid he is only in his teens. I really don't know why he dares to touch heart-cleansing Peak." The men and women behind the golden-robed child also unscrupulously commented on Lin Sun. Although there was no dirty word in their words, they were very rude and contemptuous. As soon as he entered the gate of Northlight Lin, he was blocked by a group of young men and women, which made Lin Sun frown and look at Lin Dahong next to him. Lin Dahong's face darkened and he shouted, "Xuedong, don't be rude. Lin Sun is a distinguished guest of Northlight Lin. Get out of the way quickly. Don't delay the important matter." The golden-robed child was not afraid at all. He said proudly, "Uncle Dahong, of course we know that Lin Sun is a guest, but I don't think he is qualified to challenge Brother Xiefeng." "Yes, who is Brother Xiefeng now? How can anyone challenge Brother Xiefeng?" The other men and women also echoed. Lin Dahong's expression became even gloomier and he said, "If you still don't retreat, then don't blame me for punishing all of you according to the rules of the clan." Obviously, he didn't expect that he would encounter such a thing as soon as he welcomed Lin Sun in. If Lin Sun misunderstood him, it would be very troublesome. Suddenly, the arrogance of those men and women was suppressed a lot, but the golden-robed child still straightened his neck and shouted, "Uncle Dahong, I didn't come here on purpose. As long as this guy can pass me, we will make way for him. Otherwise, he will be punished by the clan rules. Today, he can't challenge Brother Xiefeng." Lin Dahong's face was livid with anger, but there was nothing he could do. The golden-robed child in front of her was Lin Xuedong, the younger brother of Lin Xiefeng and the son of Lin Huiyuan, the leader of Northlight Lin. Even with Lin Dahong's status, he couldn't do anything to him. Lin Xuedong looked at Lin Sun provocatively. "Lin Sun, don't embarrass Uncle Dahong if you have the guts. Do you dare to fight with me first?" The men and women became excited and shouted, "If you are a man, accept the challenge. Hey, I think this guy is afraid. Didn't it spread in the city a while ago that he is the weakest leader of an aristocratic family in the Forbidden City? I don't know how many jokes he made. What leader of an aristocratic family? Does he deserve it? Without our consent, he can never inherit heart-cleansing peak justifiably. Lin Sun had been watching all this coldly. At this time, he was roughly sure that there were many people in Northlight Lin who didn't want to see him coming. Even they were full of rejection for the duel between him and Lin Xiefeng. Lin Sun, this. As soon as Lin Dahong was about to explain, Lin Sun shook his head and said casually, Zhu Laosan, you lead the way. Damn it. Lin Dahong was shocked. What he was afraid of happened. How could he expect that Lin Sun would send such a terrible figure as Zhu Laosan? When he was on heart-cleansing peak, Zhu Laosan forced Xiao Fengru and others to kneel on the ground with his killing intent alone. That kind of means could be described as shocking. If Zhu Laosan was fierce at this time, what would happen? But when Lin Dahong wanted to stop Zhu Laosan, it was too late. Zhu Laosan, who was as majestic as an iron tower, stood out with an expressionless face and strode forward. Lin Sun, Lin Xuedong was shocked and angry. He thought that Lin Sun was too shameless. He actually sent his attendants while he acted like a coward. He had no backbone at all. But as soon as he spoke, he felt that his whole body was grasped by an invisible hand. He was thrown out and rolled to the ground with a thud. No matter how he struggled, he couldn't stand up. Not only Lin Xuedong, but also a group of men and women in front of him seemed to be knocked away at this time and fell to the ground in disorder. Not to mention struggling, they couldn't even scream as if they were imprisoned there. It was extremely embarrassing. From the beginning to the end, Zhu Laosan didn't do anything at all. His majestic figure came forward with a kind of unparalleled and unstoppable momentum. Uncle, let's go. Lin Sun smiled slightly and stepped forward. Lin Dahong's lips twitched fiercely. He sighed and followed Zhu Laosan. The only thing that made him glad was that Zhu Laosan didn't kill Zhu Laosan. Otherwise, the consequences would be serious. Young master has been very merciful. According to the rules of the clan, those who dare to provoke the dignity of the patriarch will end up 10 times worse than this. Lin Zhong on the other side reminded Lin Dahong faintly, which made Lin Dahong feel uncomfortable all over. He smiled bitterly. Who could be blamed for this? Lin Sun, you are despicable. A shameless person like you doesn't deserve to be in charge of heart-cleansing peak at all. Seeing Lin Sun going farther and farther, Lin Xuedong, who fell to the ground and couldn't get up, let out a resentful cry. Lin Sun stopped at once and turned back with a smile. Whether you admit it or not, I am in charge of heart-cleansing peak now. I can forgive your ignorance just now. But if you take ignorance as confidence to provoke me, you can't bear the consequences. Remember, there will be no second time. After that, he strode away. Lin Xuedong gnashed his teeth and looked uncertain. Lin Sun just came to Northlight Lin. He didn't know how to tuck his tail between his legs. Instead, he was so arrogant. The other men and women also looked extremely gloomy. They originally came to make things difficult for Lin Sun and let him know how powerful they were. Whoever thought that Lin Sun didn't bother to pay attention to them from the beginning to the end? He directly suppressed and expelled them. It was so hateful. The place where Northlight Lin occupied was very large, covering at least dozens of acres. There were pavilions, terraces, and deep courtyards everywhere. The scenery was picturesque and the pattern was magnificent. Obviously, even if they moved away from heart-cleansing peak, Northlight Lin lived a good life. Where are we going? Lin Sun asked. The martial arts field. Lin Dahong explained. Many people in the clan know that you are coming today, so they have been waiting there for a long time. At that time, the duel between you and Xiefeng will be held there. Lin Sun nodded and suddenly asked, Most people in Northlight Lin don't want to admit my identity now, do they? Lin Dahong muttered in his heart. Not only did they not want to admit it, but they also wanted to take away the power in Lin Sun's hands like Westbrook, Floating Cloud and Flying Peak. Of course, Lin Dahong couldn't say this. He just smiled helplessly and said, "After all, you are new here, and it's difficult to convince the public. But don't worry. Since Northlight Ancestor arranged this opportunity for you, if you can win it, it may change the clan's view on you a lot." Lin Sun heard Lin Dahong's insincerity, but he didn't expose it. He said, "That's good. In fact, the only purpose of my coming here is to see my fifth granduncle." Lin Dahong was surprised and reminded, "Lin Sun, your idea is good, but the premise is that you have to pass the test of Xiefeng first. At that time, you can only rely on yourself, and outsiders can't help you." As he said, he glanced at Zhu Laosan in front of him intentionally or unintentionally. Obviously, he was not very optimistic about the duel between Lin Sun and Lin Xiefeng. Lin Sun could naturally hear it, but he didn't explain and just smiled. Not long after they moved forward, another accident happened. A man in a jade robe with a gloomy face stood in front of Lin Dahong. When he saw Lin Dahong, he shouted at him, "Dahong, what are you doing as an uncle? How can you watch outsiders bully our clan's juniors?" His words showed that the man in the jade robe already knew what happened to Lin Xuedong and the other girls. Before Lin Dahong could explain, the man in the jade robe looked at Lin Sun coldly. "Are you Lin Sun? You are so arrogant at such a young age. Now, as long as you bow your head and apologize, I will forgive you this time. Otherwise, the gate of Northlight Lin will not welcome you." His words were aggressive. At this moment, Lin Sun finally frowned and suddenly said, "Uncle, who is this?" "Lin Daqian, according to seniority, he is your uncle." Lin Dahong explained, "Lin Sun, don't act recklessly again." Lin Sun looked at Lin Daqian calmly. After a while, he smiled and said, "Just now, Lin Xuedong and the others dared to rush forward to provoke me. You must have instigated them, right?" Lin Daqian's face changed slightly, and then he said angrily, "Young man, you don't know how to repent your mistakes. How dare you slander me?" Lin Sun ignored him and said, "Zhu Laosan." These three words almost became Lin's catchphrase, which made Lin Dahong shudder with fear every time he said it. He cried out involuntarily, "Never!" With a swish, he stood in front of Zhu Laosan and shouted at Lin Daqian, "Brother Daqian, why don't you step back?" Lin Daqian was not a fool. At a glance, he knew that the so-called Zhu Laosan should be an extremely powerful figure. "Young man, wait and see." In the end, Lin Daqian left with a livid face. Lin Sun smiled and watched the figure disappear. Then he said softly, "You are asking for humiliation." Chapter 360. Seeking Humiliation. Hearing Lin Sun's comment, Lin Dahong couldn't help but smile bitterly. Lin Sun was too powerful. He summoned Zhu Laosan at will. This was the territory of Northlight Lin. Wasn't he worried about causing a great disaster? Lin Sun was really not worried. His current situation was bad enough. If he behaved like a coward, he would only be bullied more severely. If he could win the support of Northlight Lin this time, it would be great. If not, Lin Sun didn't care. Northlight Lin had become enemies with Westbrook Lin, Floating Cloud Lin and Flying Peak Lin. Of course, this was the worst result. Lin Sun hoped that Northlight Lin wouldn't embarrass him too much. Fortunately, he didn't encounter any twists and turns and troubles on the way. Not long after, under the guidance of Lin Dahong, Lin Sun smoothly came to the martial practice field. This was an extremely spacious field, covering a large area. The ground was paved with hard steel stones, and there was a spiritual formation. It was very extraordinary. At this time, near the martial practice field, there were already dense figures, men and women, old and young. A rough count showed that there were thousands of people. Lin Sun was stunned. "So many people?" Lin Dahong explained, "There are only hundreds of real clansmen of Northlight Lin. Most of the others are relatives and guests." Lin Sun felt a little complicated in his heart. If the direct descendants of Lin family hadn't been killed, the number of clansmen should be more. Look, that boy should be Lin Sun. Humph. Uncle Dakian said that this boy just bullied people and even disrespected Uncle Dakian. He is so arrogant. He dares to come here. Hey, ignorant people are fearless. I really don't know what Ancestor Northlight likes about this boy. He even arranged Brother Xiefeng to fight with him. It's too much. At this time, the crowd distributed near the martial practice field also found Lin Sun's trace and immediately began to talk. Listening to the disdain, displeasure, anger and contempt, most clansmen of Northlight Lin rejected Lin Sun's coming this time. Although Lin Sun had expected this, he was still a little surprised when he saw it with his own eyes. Lin Sun, you should be more tolerant. Don't get angry again. If you cause a big trouble, even Ancestor Northlight can't do anything about it. Lin Dahong said in a low voice, with a trace of begging. He was really shocked by Lin Sun's strong means before, and he was afraid that Lin Sun would lose his temper again at this time. Yes, I won't. Lin Sun smiled, looking calm and relaxed. But the more he acted like this, the more uncertain Lin Dahong felt in his heart, and he couldn't help but laugh bitterly. This kid. I really don't know how he cultivated his courage. Fortunately, it didn't take long for someone to help Lin Dahong. It was a middle-aged man in a violet robe, with jet-black hair, eyes that were deep like an abyss, and a steady and graceful bearing. He strode to Lin Sun, glanced at Zhu Laosan and Lin Zhong, and then said to Lin Sun, Lin Sun? Lin Dahong on the side quickly introduced, Lin Sun, this is Lin Huiyuan, the leader of Northlight Lin, your uncle. Greetings, uncle. Lin Sun cupped his hands. Well, since you are here, it means that you are ready for the duel. Now you can go to the arena and wait. Xiefeng will come later. Lin Huiyuan was still dignified, neither happy nor angry, and people couldn't see his inner mood. Okay. Lin Sun nodded and agreed. Lin Huiyuan was stunned when he saw Lin Sun agreed so quickly. He couldn't help but look at him deeply and said, Do what you can. If you can't hold on, just take the initiative to admit defeat. No one will embarrass you in Northlight Lin. Lin Sun smiled and said, Thank you for reminding me. From beginning to end, Lin Sun behaved well and didn't show any emotional changes. Go ahead. Lin Huiyuan said no more. Immediately, Lin Sun motioned to Lin Zhong and Zhu Laosan to let them wait on one side, and he went to the arena alone. Seeing this, those people who had been waiting nearby suddenly became excited and shouted, as if they were injected with chicken blood. Look, this kid really dares to fight. Ignorance is fearless. If he knew Xiefeng's strength, I'm afraid he would regret agreeing so quickly. Hey, it's good. This kid boasts that he is the leader of Heart Cleansing Peak, which has already made me very unhappy. If Xiefeng can teach him a hard lesson, it can't be better. All kinds of voices full of ridicule and contempt sounded one after another. Facing the sound waves, Lin Sun walked forward with a calm and composed look, as if he had not been affected at all. When he arrived at the center of the arena, Lin Sun stood quietly, looking at his nose and heart like an old monk in meditation. His calm and composed actions caused many people to be unable to help but be surprised, and if it was any other young man, that young man would have probably been angered to the point of losing his mind. But Lin Sun didn't. However, most people subconsciously thought that Lin Sun was pretending. After all, he was just a young man in Heavengang realm. Even if he was calm, he was doomed to be defeated in the face of Lin Xiefeng, a peerless talent. He looked like a broken jar that had been smashed. Hey, Lin Sun, I advise you to take the initiative to surrender. How dare you challenge Brother Xiefeng? You don't know what's good for you. A girl snorted. If I were you, I would never do such a thing to humiliate myself. If you are smart, you will admit defeat obediently, which will make people look up to you. But no matter how harsh the sarcasm were, Lin Sun remained indifferent. In the distance, Lin Zhong looked gloomy. He felt painful and helpless in his heart. If the direct power of Lin family was still there, who dared to humiliate the young master like this? These collateral clansmen were too much. Even Lin Dahong was worried, but he didn't feel unfair for Lin Sun. He was worried that Lin Sun couldn't bear such humiliation and would go crazy completely. Only Zhu Laosan stood there like a sculpture, silent. But no one noticed that occasionally when his eyes swept over Lin Sun, who stood alone in the arena and suffered all kinds of humiliation and sarcasm, a strange light flashed in his eyes. "Forgive me, everyone. Xiefeng is a step late." Suddenly, a clear voice sounded in the void in the distance. It was just a sentence, but it made all the people in the field completely excited. They all shouted with excitement and admiration. Some girls even let out starry-eyed screams. "Brother Xiefeng, it's Brother Xiefeng! Ha ha ha, it's going to be a good show." In the nation test a few days ago, elder brother Xiefeng showed his unparalleled brilliance and advanced smoothly. Compared with him, Lin Sun is just like a clown, not worth mentioning. In the void, a divine rainbow that looked like misty rain appeared, traversing across the void. A young man in white stepped on the divine rainbow and came over. Wearing a feather crown, with sword-like eyebrows and starry eyes, he walked on the void with a faint aura of misty rain. He looked very handsome and extraordinary. Some people could be known to be extraordinary at first sight, such as Lin Xiefeng in front of him. Ordinary people could not be compared with him only by his bearing. Swish! His figure floated into the field, like a crane among chickens. There was a burst of thunderous cheers in the field. "I haven't seen him for many years. Xiefeng has grown up, but he is too sharp. I'm afraid he will encounter many setbacks in the future." In the distance, Lin Zhong said quietly. "Lin Zhong, how can you say that?" Lin Dahong stared and scolded. He didn't dare to scold Lin Sun, but he didn't put Lin Zhong in his eyes. Lin Zhong smiled embarrassedly and didn't explain. At this time, Lin Sun also raised his eyes and looked at Lin Xiefeng standing more than 30 meters away. At a glance, Lin Sun could see that Lin Xiefeng was indeed in sea spirit realm. His genuine spirit was released and lingered around his body, which looked extremely threatening. "You must be Lin Sun. Sorry to keep you waiting." Lin Xiefeng also looked at Lin Sun. As he spoke, the noise in the field became silent, which made Lin Xiefeng's power more extraordinary. "Not bad," Lin Sun said casually. "I know you are the son of Uncle Wenjing. Considering that we are from the same clan, I have a word of advice." Lin Xiefeng muttered. "Go ahead," Lin Sun said. "In my heart, I always have an idea to lead Lin family back to Heart-Cleansing Peak and restore its former glory, including revenge for your lineage." Lin Xiefeng's voice was clear and powerful. "My great-grandfather trained me in the same way. He told me not to forget the humiliation and hatred of those years. Now you are back, which undoubtedly gives me a chance." Lin Sun raised his eyebrows and said, "What chance?" Lin Xiefeng stared at Lin Sun and said word by word, "A chance to take charge of Heart-Cleansing Peak and unify the internal troubles of Lin family." His voice was sonorous and complacent, which aroused the cheers of the audience. Lin Huayuan, Lin Daqian and others in the distance couldn't help but smile with relief. Even Lin Dahong nodded repeatedly. Lin Zhong's face was extremely gloomy. Lin Sun's words sounded good, but his intention was vicious. Obviously, he wanted to take away the inheritance of his young master. But Lin Sun smiled and said, "Your ambition is a little big. I also have a word of advice. Don't bite off more than you can chew." Lin Xiefeng frowned. Before he spoke, people around him couldn't help but shout. "Little thing, how can you say that? Presumptuous! How can you say that? Brother Xiefeng, don't care about this kind of person, so as not to lower your status." Lin Xiefeng waved his hand to stop the noise in the field. He looked at Lin Sun calmly and said, "You don't have to be so resistant. As your elder brother, I will not let you be neglected. On the contrary, as long as you hand over heart-cleansing peak, I can let you enjoy the same status and identity as other clansmen, and I will help you revenge." After a pause, a look of arrogance and confidence appeared on his face. He continued, "This is my sincerity. You should know that I am more suitable to take over heart-cleansing peak than you in any aspect." These words were said with awe-inspiring righteousness. It seemed that he completely considered for Lin Sun and the whole Lin family, which made people around him couldn't help cheering loudly again. Lin Sun was silent, and there was a faint cold current surging in his black eyes. Chapter 361. Seeing that Lin Sun didn't speak, Lin Xiefeng couldn't help but smile. "Lin Sun, I know you are very tired. There are too many things on your back. You are doomed to be unable to bear such a heavy responsibility with your ability." Lin Xiefeng said in a warm voice, "Leave it to me. You don't have to be so tired. It's enough for me to shoulder the burden of Lin family in the future." All eyes turned to Lin Sun. Many people thought that Lin Xiefeng had shown enough sincerity. If Lin Sun still didn't know what was good for him, he would be too ungrateful. Lin Zhong's face was extremely gloomy. He thought it was just a duel. Who would have thought that there were so many dirty tricks hidden in it? If he had known this, he shouldn't have let the young master come. Alas! In this silence, Lin Sun suddenly let out a long sigh. "I didn't expect that I finally met a confidant in Lin family. He understood my heart and my situation. The key was that he would share my worries at all costs." Everyone was excited. They thought that this boy was smart enough to know that it was the most sensible decision to agree. Lin Xiefeng's smile became more gentle. He was very satisfied with Lin Sun's performance. He even thought that when Lin Sun handed over the power of heart-cleansing peak, he might really give him some benefit. But to their surprise, Lin Sun soon changed the topic and said quietly, "How can I deserve such love?" Speaking of this, Lin Sun looked firm and said sonorously, "Well, let me bear this burden alone. As the saying goes, if I don't go to hell, who will?" All the people present were stunned. They almost couldn't believe their ears. Was this boy crazy? How could he say such shameless words? The smile on Lin Xiefeng's lips also froze. He still didn't believe it and said, "Lin Sun, did you misunderstand?" Lin Sun sighed with a deep face. "Brother, you didn't misunderstand. I'm serious. Let me bear this sin." At this time, everyone finally realized that Lin Sun was deliberately teasing them. Damn it! Many people's faces became ugly. This boy was too rampant. If he didn't agree, he should just say it directly. How dare he tease them? He was courting death. Even with Lin Xiefeng's calmness and broad-mindedness, he also felt a tightness in his chest at this moment. There was a touch of coldness between his eyebrows inadvertently. "Fine, since you don't appreciate my kindness, then let's see who's the real deal." Lin Xiefeng showed a look of, "Since you are heartless, I must be righteous." Lin Sun smiled and agreed, "It should have been like this long ago." Lin Xiefeng's lips twitched imperceptibly. He suddenly felt that if he continued to talk with Lin Sun, he would be so angry that he would lose his sense of propriety. "I'm so angry. This guy is too much. Brother Xiefeng, you must give him an unforgettable lesson." Someone shouted angrily. "Yes. We can't let him off so easily." The others also shouted with righteous indignation. In the distance, Lin Huayuan, Lin Daqian and others couldn't help frowning. They no longer expected Lin Sun to retreat. In their view, Lin Sun was the kind of arrogant boy who would not give up until he reached the Yellow River and would not turn back until he hit the wall. Perhaps it was time to teach him a lesson so that he could recognize his current situation. However, Lin Zhong smiled. His young master was still the same. He didn't seem to show his strength, but no one could take advantage of him. Immediately, Lin Zhong couldn't help but feel nervous. If it was a real fight, he would inevitably worry whether Lin Sun could hold on for more than 100 moves under Lin Xiefeng's hands. After all, there was a big gap between the two. Moreover, Lin Xiefeng was not an ordinary person. He was a talent who had passed the nation test, which would undoubtedly bring more pressure to his young master. But Lin Zhong was helpless at present and couldn't help. He could only hope that a miracle would happen to Lin Sun. 100 moves. If you don't lose, you win. In the arena, Lin Xiefeng said coldly. In an instant, the momentum around him suddenly changed. Misty rain and sharp light were revealed. The terrible momentum went straight to the sky and disturbed the wind and clouds. His white clothes fluttered. Standing there at will, he vividly demonstrated the bearing and power of a sea spirit realm practitioner. Many people in the field were amazed with their eyes brightened. Remember, I won't show mercy. Come on. Lin Xiefeng's long hair was flying, and he was surrounded by misty rain, like a god. Lin Sun smiled slightly. You'd better not show mercy. Otherwise, if you lose in the end, people will think that you deliberately let me win, which will make me very uncomfortable. Lin Xiefeng's eyes darkened. Whoosh. At this moment Lin Sun attacked. His figure was like lightning, wrapped in a touch of bright cyan luster, and he rushed out. Boom! A dazzling punch was thrown out. It was the mountain-breaking move of the 9 strikes for shaking heaven. The void collapsed and wailed, and the airflow was chaotic. In the distance, some powerful figures such as Lin Huayuan and Lin Daqian were surprised. It was not easy to use such a terrible power in Heavengang realm. No wonder he dared to come to fight. It turned out that he had something to rely on. Unfortunately, his opponent was Xiefeng. No matter how powerful he was in Heavengang realm, he was doomed to lose this battle. Lin Xiefeng didn't take it seriously at the beginning. In his opinion, Lin Sun was just a young man in Heavengang realm, and he was younger than him. It was like an ant trying to shake a tree or an egg hitting a stone. But when Lin Sun punched out, Lin Xiefeng suddenly knew that he had underestimated this boy. Of course, that was all. Good. Lin Xiefeng smiled and stood in the same place, sending out his sword. An expanse of misty rain-like rays of light condensed and poured down, and it was indescribably overflowing with freehand feeling. It was like a painter was splashing ink and painting. Illusionary misty rain technique. Elder brother Xiefeng has demonstrated this unique skill to the point of perfection. It's really amazing that there's no smoke and fire in it. Hey, Lin Sun is going to suffer. Many people in the field were excited and amazed by Lin Xiefeng's skills. Boom! There was a terrible collision sound, and the spiritual light splashed and swept away. The spiritual formation on the martial arts field had already been activated and turned into an invisible defensive force, which resolved all the aftermath of the battle and prevented the people outside the field from being affected. Deng deng deng! Lin Sun was shaken back a few steps. There was a burst of laughter in the field. It was obvious who was stronger after one blow. But to everyone's surprise, Lin Sun also showed a smile at the moment and said, "Is this the power of Sea Spirit Realm? Just SOSO." Before his voice died away, he had already rushed out again. Compared with before, his momentum was obviously improved. His whole body was enshrouded with azure spiritual power, and he was as powerful as a dragon. "You don't know what's good for you," Lin Xiefeng sneered. With a swish, he stepped forward like a misty rain, and his white and slender palm was wrapped with great power. Boom! The two fought together like two volcanoes colliding, producing terrible turbulence of power, changing the color of the world and bursting the void. It had to be said that the power of Sea Spirit Realm was really terrifying. Every move of Sea Spirit Realm could affect the power of heaven and earth and produce enough power to disturb yin and yang. In just a moment, Lin Sun was shaken out. But to everyone's surprise, it was as if nothing had happened to him, and he charged forward once more. How could it be possible? When did Heavengang Realm become so powerful? Many people were in an uproar. Even Lin Huayuan and others in the distance couldn't help narrowing their eyes. Lin Sun's tenacity was really extraordinary. If it were other Heaven Gang realm practitioners, it would be difficult for them to resist Lin Xiefeng's attacks. This was not to underestimate the heroes in the world, but the absolute advantage from the realm, which made any Heaven Gang realm practitioner feel very vulnerable when facing Sea Spirit realm practitioners. But Lin Sun was shaken back twice in a row, but he was not injured. Instead, his momentum became stronger and stronger, which was very different. This boy's foundation is really powerful. I'm afraid that it's hard for him to meet his opponent in Gang Spirit realm. If he is given a few more years, he may grow into a figure comparable to Xiefeng. Lin Huayuan thought, it's a pity that there is only one candidate who can take charge of Heart Cleansing Peak. Lin Sun is not as good as Xiefeng at present. At this time, Lin Sun had completely devoted himself to the battle. His mind was empty and he focused on the front. He fully deduced the mystery of 9 strikes for shaking heaven. Mountain opening collapse, sea splitting collapse, void refining collapse, soul breaking collapse, boa dragon collapse, phoenix collapse. This ancient inheritance hidden in the fragments of heaven-shaking ancient seal in the heaven-accessing place was wantonly exerted by Lin Sun, which produced all kinds of anomalies. But even so, Lin Sun was constantly shaken back. Although he was not injured, his blood and qi were rolling all over his body, which was quite uncomfortable. Lin Sun was indeed very powerful. He was the most powerful opponent Lin Sun had ever fought with except Qi Tsangfeng since he started his cultivation. Like Qi Tsangfeng, Lin Sun was also a Sea Spirit Realm practitioner. However, compared with the past, Lin Sun had also transformed completely. After more than 20 days of enlightenment on the top of Heart Cleansing Peak, he had fully realized the phenomenon of heaven and earth and the power of the heavens. Many wonderful changes had taken place in and out of his body. Now Lin Sun was in the fulfillment of Heaven Gang realm and was likely to break through at any time. The reason why he didn't break through was that, as he once told Lin Zhong, I haven't seen enough of the elephant in the world. It's not too late to break through when I need it. At present, the pressure brought to him by Lin Sun was not enough to make him have the idea of breaking through. Rumble, the fierce battle went on. In a short period of time, they had exchanged more than 30 moves. Lin Sun was inferior and was constantly shaken. It seemed that he was likely to be suppressed at any time. But every time, he unexpectedly persisted, which surprised many people outside the field and caused an uproar. Lin Sun's face had become cold. Lin Sun's performance surprised him again and again. Lin Sun was like an undying cockroach. Originally, he thought that he could completely suppress Lin Sun with only a few moves. But now, it seemed that if he didn't use some real means, it would be difficult to achieve this step. This made Lin Sun a little uncomfortable. Since when could a Heaven Gang realm cultivator be so strong to such an extent? If it was spread out, he would be laughed at to death. Chapter 362. Boom. In anger, Lin Xiefeng's figure flashed, and he raised his hand. His palm was misty and dreamy like a dream. In an instant, a thunderous collision broke out in the arena, and cracks appeared on the ground paved with fine steel stones. Without exception, Lin Sun was shaken back again. Next, I'll show you what the real power of Sea Spirit Realm is. In the indifferent words, Lin Xiefeng's figure rose into the air, surrounded by blazing luster, overlooking Lin Sun. Brother Xiefeng finally stopped holding back. It should have been like this long ago. All the people around were excited, and they couldn't wait for Lin Xiefeng to suppress Lin Sun immediately. Lin Xiefeng was forced to show his real skills. He is really a talent. However, everything will change from now on. Lin Huayuan murmured in the distance. He can fly in the air and hurt people in the air. There is no need to fight anymore. Young Master has already fallen into a disadvantage. Lin Zhong's heart suddenly tightened, and his face showed worry. The most distinctive feature of Sea Spirit Realm was that they could fly in the air and hurt people in the air, which Lin Sun couldn't do at present. Lin Xiefeng had suppressed Lin Xiefeng innately. Clatter in the air, Lin Xiefeng showed a disdainful look, like a god looking down. He crossed his hands and waved them at will. The misty light poured down and covered the void here. Bang! 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 A series of explosions sounded. The misty light seemed to be gentle, yet as soon as it descended, it actually caused space to collapse and caused deafening rumbles to resound. It was terrible. Obviously, it was a unique secret method. Lin Sun's black eyes were calm, but his body moved at full speed at this moment, like a flowing lightning and flickering ghost. Whoosh! For a moment, the arena was full of the residual shadows left by Lin Sun's movement, which showed how amazing his speed was. With this kind of dodging, Lin Sun actually resolved Lin Xiefeng's attack without any danger. Shit! How is this possible? Brother Xiefeng's attack has covered all directions. It's hard for any practitioner of Heavengang Realm to dodge, but Lin Sun. Brother Xiefeng, how did he do it? The power of the Sea of Souls realm is so horrifying. It is like an inescapable net pressing down. How could this brat dodge it? There was an uproar in the field, full of horror. Nobody expected that Lin Sun, who was at a disadvantage, could completely avoid Lin Xiefeng's attack with his body movements. Humph! In the void, Lin Xiefeng snorted coldly and displayed all the unique skills he had mastered. Pieces of dreamy misty rain poured down one after another. Each strike could easily kill any Sea of Souls realm cultivator, and could even make Sea of Souls realm cultivators feel fear. The might that was released caused the entire training ground to fall into a state of chaos. Space wailed and the airflow became chaotic, emitting ear-piercing explosions. The hearts of everyone shook as they watched, and they were repeatedly shocked. This was the might of the spiritual ocean tier. They stood proudly in the sky, killed their enemies from a distance, and with a wave of their hand, they were able to release the might to overturn mountains and overturn seas. Under the cover of such violent and terrible attacks, Lin Sun obviously became embarrassed. He was like a lonely boat in the vast sea, which would capsize at any time. Such a dangerous scene caused Lin Zhong's heart to palpitate with fear, and he was nervous to the extreme. Many people in the field couldn't help cheering, thinking that Lin Sun could not escape under such suppression. But as time went by, Lin Sun, who should have been suppressed in the eyes of the public, narrowly avoided the killing moves every time and turned danger into safety. His figure was extremely embarrassed, and he had suffered many injuries in the process of dodging, many of which were bleeding. But even so, Lin Sun did not fall until now. Let's see how long you can hold on. Lin Xiefeng's face was gloomy. He waved his hands continuously, interweaving misty rain and glows, like a sweeping wave. The whole training ground shook and roared, which showed how terrible Lin Xiefeng's attack was. Looking at Lin Xiefeng carefully, his face had turned red, and his body was blazing with glows. Obviously, he had used all his strength. Under such attacks, Lin Sun was in a more and more precarious situation. At this time, he was bathed in blood, and there were countless wounds on his body. But his deep black eyes were still terrifyingly calm. His figure seemed to be dodging with great difficulty, but he was not crushed to the ground. It's strange. How can this boy not be defeated? Xiefeng is at the spiritual ocean realm, and he passed the nation test smoothly. But Lin Sun is only at the Heavengang realm. How can he hold on until now? I don't understand. This battle is too strange. All the people around were shocked. They didn't know how Lin Sun did it. Even Lin Huayuan in the distance was surprised. With his eyesight, he could only see that Lin Sun seemed to have the ability of foresight. He could always avoid the killing moves at the most dangerous time. This was too unbelievable. Young Master has reached such a level of understanding of the general trend of the world. He has even surpassed Lin Xiefeng, who is also at the spiritual ocean realm. Lin Zhong seemed to see something and was shocked. Lin Sun was indeed unable to fight back. But when he dodged, he could keenly capture the power of heaven and earth that Lin Xiefeng used in the battle. It was because he saw through this that he avoided the killing moves again and again, as if he could foresee the future. Before long, something even more unexpected happened. Lin Xiefeng, who was displaying his divine power in the void, floated down and retreated to the ground. Lin Xiefeng also had difficulties in his heart. Although he had the upper hand in the air just now, he consumed a lot of power as he attacked with all his strength. In particular, he had just reached the spiritual ocean realm and hadn't perfectly controlled the power of the spiritual ocean realm, so he dared not continue to fight like this. Otherwise, if his physical strength was exhausted, it might create an opportunity for Lin Sun. However, Lin Xiefeng also had his own plan. As soon as he landed, he suddenly flashed and rushed to Lin Sun. Since he couldn't hurt Lin Sun in the air, he would fight in close combat. Relying on the power of the spiritual ocean realm, even the slippery loach couldn't escape the fate of being trampled. However, Lin Sun seemed to have been waiting for this moment for a long time. When Lin Xiefeng rushed to him, his dodging figure suddenly stopped. Lin Xiefeng narrowed his eyes and seemed to be a little surprised. Whoosh! At this moment, flowing light saber suddenly appeared, and the reaching for the stars, which had reached the consummate level, appeared in the air at this moment. Everyone in the field only felt dizzy, as if they saw the eternal night coming, thousands of stars falling, and the destructive atmosphere spreading. Bang! Lin Xiefeng was directly hit by this saber and retreated more than 30 meters away. If he hadn't taken out a bronze sword to block in front of him at the critical moment, he would have been split in half by this saber. You! Lin Xiefeng was furious. He couldn't believe that Lin Sun, who was only at the Heaven Gang realm, could beat him back, but Lin Sun didn't give him time to react at all. He jumped forward and slashed again. This saber was like the bright moon in the blue sea. It contained the anger that Lin Sun had been suppressing for a long time. This saber was also the most resolute and tough counterattack to the ridicule and sarcasm around him since the beginning of the battle. Who didn't get angry? Who could be indifferent to provocation, ridicule and humiliation? Since he entered Northlight Lin, he had seen nothing but rejection and ridicule all the way. He didn't even get the least respect. How could Lin Sun not get angry? He had been waiting for this moment for too long, and now he finally got the chance. He had exerted his most powerful blow regardless of everything. This saber was reaching for the moon, one of the 3 unique skills of Tianyuan's saber play. This world was like the eternal night. There was only a flash of saber light, wrapped in a bright moon, hanging high in the sky, sprinkling lonely and cold light. An indescribable sense of despair and insignificance spread uncontrollably in the hearts of everyone present, making them dull. Bang! Lin Xiefeng roared and tried his best to resist, but he still failed to block this terrible saber. The bronze sword in his hand directly burst into powder. He was fiercely slashed away and fell to the ground with a thud. His handsome face suddenly turned pale, and he couldn't help spitting out a mouthful of blood. There was a dead silence in the whole area. Everyone's eyes were wide open as they looked at this scene in disbelief, and they had a horrified look on their faces. One saber, seriously injuring and defeating Lin Xiefeng? Who could believe it? At this time, even Lin Huayuan and other big shots were shocked. The saber play that Lin Sun had just displayed amazed them and was incredible. It was not like what a Heaven Gang realm practitioner could display at all. It was too strong. They couldn't imagine how there could be such a mysterious saber skill in the world, which could enable a young man of Heaven Gang realm to defeat his opponent. It turns out that young master also has a trump card, Lin Zhong murmured in his heart. He suddenly turned his head and asked, Zhu Laosan, can you see the mystery of the saber just now? Zhu Laosan was indifferent and said nothing. Lin Zhong immediately laughed at himself and didn't take it seriously. It was more difficult to make a reticent guy like Zhu Laosan open his mouth. It's very similar to the power of wills. It's rare in the world. To Lin Zhong's surprise, it didn't take long for Zhu Laosan to transmit his voice to him, which made him slightly stunned and immediately nodded. He had the same feeling. The power of Lin Sun's saber skill had broken the recognized convention in the world. It was like a legendary divine skill, which had the mystery of the creation of heaven and earth. In the field, Lin Sun's figure was bathed in blood, standing alone. His handsome face under his long black hair was full of disdain under the sunlight. At this moment, many clansmen of Northlight Lin clan were speechless, as if they had been slapped hard in the face. No one dared to make sarcastic remarks or ridicule him anymore. Just by looking at Lin Sun, they felt a chill in their hearts. What kind of freak was this young man? How could he hurt Lin Xiefeng with the cultivation of Heaven Gang realm? It was terrible. It's impossible. In the distance, Lin Xiefeng, who fell to the ground, was also stunned for a moment. It seemed that he couldn't believe it, and then his face turned blue. He roared and turned over. Chapter 363. Lin Xiefeng stood up angrily like a madman. He was successful at a young age and made great progress in cultivation. He was praised as the most dazzling genius of Northlight Lin. In the recent nation test, he got the 79th place and was successfully admitted by Green Deer School. Such a person had long been recognized as the only candidate to inherit Northlight Lin. But now, in the duel with Lin Sun, instead of suppressing his opponent, he was beaten back and injured, which was a great shame for him. How could Lin Xiefeng not be angry when a young man of Heaven Gang realm, who was younger than him, hurt him in the duel? I did underestimate you before, but this duel is not over yet. Lin Xiefeng's eyes were as cold as a knife, cold and frightening. He was completely enraged. Lin Sun, on the opposite side, smiled softly. He was covered with blood and countless scars. Drops of blood were still dripping to the ground, which looked terrible. This made many people think that if the battle continued, Lin Sun, who was obviously an arrow at the end of its flight, would be defeated. But now, at this severe and cruel moment, he unexpectedly laughed. Why did he laugh? Many people were sullen and looked terrible. Was this boy mocking them? Xiefeng, step back. 100 moves have passed. There is no need to continue this duel. Suddenly, a majestic and deep voice sounded in the distance. It was Lin Huayuan who spoke. All the people present were stunned and their expressions were uncertain. Thinking about it carefully, they found that the battle had indeed exceeded 100 moves from the beginning to the present. According to the rules, as long as Lin Sun persisted in 100 moves without being defeated, it would be regarded as a victory. All of a sudden, even Lin Xiefeng's face became extremely bad and his eyes were about to burst into flames. He had forgotten about this. Did he really have to admit defeat to a young man of Heaven Gang realm? Lin Xiefeng felt aggrieved as if he had eaten a fly. His dignity and pride couldn't allow him to bow down at this moment. Even he didn't want to give up at this moment. If so, didn't it prove that Lin Xiefeng was defeated by a young man of Heaven Gang realm? If this was spread out, he would become a laughingstock in the Forbidden City. The atmosphere was dead silent. At this moment, everyone knew why Lin Sun suddenly laughed. It was the smile of a winner, which was particularly dazzling. In the distance, Lin Zhong also laughed. He was ecstatic and said to Lin Dahong next to him, "Hey, what do you think of my young master?" Lin Dahong's face darkened. "How can you ask like this?" Feeling aggrieved, he could only snort coldly. Lin Zhong smiled even more happily. The young master's performance today had broadened his horizons, and he couldn't help but look at him in a new light. He even thought that if the young master had not missed the nation test, he could have passed the test successfully with this kind of fighting capacity. But before Lin Zhong could be happy for a moment, Lin Sun suddenly said in the martial arts field, "You are not convinced?" Everyone was stunned, and then the expressions of many sank. The battle has already come to an end. Could it be that this kid intends to flaunt his prowess as the victor? Lin Xiefeng snorted coldly with a gloomy face. He secretly swore that if Lin Sun dared to humiliate him with words, he wouldn't mind breaking the rules and rushing to beat him up directly. Unexpectedly, Lin Sun stopped smiling and said in a flat voice, "If you are not convinced, I can give you another chance to fight after 10 minutes. What? The whole audience was in an uproar. They almost couldn't believe their ears. Was this kid crazy? He was seriously injured now. How dare he continue to clamor to fight with Lin Xiefeng? In the time it takes to brew a cup of tea. Even if he was given 2 hours, he might not be able to recover at all. Your young master is very courageous." Lin Dahong in the distance laughed at once. This time it was Lin Zhong's turn to be gloomy. He also complained in his heart. He didn't know why Lin Sun still did this when he had already won. Even Lin Huayuan in the distance couldn't help but be stunned. What on earth was Lin Sun thinking? "Are you sure?" Lin Xiefeng was suspicious. "Since I will be in charge of the whole Lin family in the future, I will not joke about this kind of thing," Lin Sun said calmly. To be in charge of Lin family. Lin Xiefeng's heart was inexplicably filled with uncontrollable anger. He gritted his teeth and said, "No need. You can rest and recover as much as you want. As long as you think you can fight again, I will accompany you to the end." These words seemed to be beautiful, but in fact, he had lost to Lin Sun in momentum. After all, according to the previous agreement, Lin Xiefeng had actually lost. It was obviously disgraceful for him to insist on fighting again at this time. But this was Northlight Lin, so no one would laugh at Lin Xiefeng. On the contrary, because of Lin Sun's action, many people present were impressed by him. They thought that even if he was arrogant, few people could match his courage. The whole audience was silent. All eyes were fixed on Lin Sun, who stood there alone. Different from what people expected, Lin Sun didn't sit cross-legged to meditate, nor did he swallow the spiritual medicine to save himself. He just stood there. Blood stained his lapel, and he stood with the saber in his hand. The wind blew, and his long hair fluttered. There was an indescribable look on his angular and handsome face at this time. Boom! Suddenly, a tyrannical momentum gushed out of his body, rushed straight to the sky, and shattered the clouds. In an instant, with him as the center, it was like a hurricane was set off on the flat ground, disturbing the wind and clouds, and changing the weather. This, many people exclaimed. And people like Lin Huayuan, Lin Zhong, and Zhu Laosan seemed to realize something, and their eyes burst out with a terrible luster. Immediately, Lin Sun raised his head slightly, and a pair of deep black eyes glanced at the sky. At this moment, everyone had a strange feeling that Lin Sun seemed to be waiting for something. It seemed that something was about to happen in the sky. Sure enough, there was a loud bang, like the roar of thunder god, exploding in the sky, shaking the earth, and making everyone present tremble. What was going to happen? Many people's faces changed suddenly. It wasn't long before they saw light cyan rainbows condensed above the sky, like illusory divine light, falling from the universe to the world. They intertwined with each other and drifted in the void, deducing an indescribable majestic force, which bathed Lin Sun in it. At this time, Lin Sun's body was like an abyss storm, crazily devouring the falling cyan rainbows, and his own breath was constantly rising. A strange phenomenon from the sky? Many people in the field were shocked and couldn't believe it. They felt a kind of terrible coercion from the sky, which made their souls palpitate. Lin Huayuan, Lin Zhong, Zhu Laosan, and other big shots were also moved. In their perception, the power around Lin Sun was being baptized by a majestic force from the sky. Boom! 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 The hurricane, centered on Lin Sun, swallowed the world. Such a scene could be described as shocking. Lin Sun stood there with his eyes closed. The storm around him rushed to the sky, and his body was intertwined with light cyan rainbows, which was as dazzling as the sun. Many people couldn't see clearly. They could only see the rainbows intertwined in the sky, and the storm was rotating between the sky and the earth. In the depths of the storm, Lin Sun's figure had been completely submerged by the bright light. At the same time, every inch of Lin Sun's flesh and blood, tendons, bones, and internal organs seemed to be in nirvana. They were tempered and baptized by the majestic force and underwent a rebirth. Boom! In Lin Sun's body, the surging spiritual energy was like a roaring torrent, being tempered and squeezed by the windstorm millstone. In the end, they all gathered in the sea of Qi. Open! Lin Sun whispered in his heart. In the chaotic sea of Qi, there was a cracking sound, as if an invisible barrier had been broken, or an invisible shackle had disintegrated, opening up a new world. Boom! The majestic power that had been accumulated in the Sea of Qi seemed to have found a vent at this moment, roaring into the Sea of Qi. Immediately, a long river of spiritual power condensed and took shape. Before long, more and more long rivers of spiritual power began to appear, and hundreds and thousands of them appeared. Later, the dense long rivers of spiritual power surged and converged into one place, turning into the prototype of a vast ocean. It was indeed like a sea. The Sea of Qi, the root of Qi, was as boundless as the sea. In the past, the Sea of Qi was chaotic and untouchable, but now it had turned into a turbulent sea of spiritual power. This was the Sea Spirit Realm. When one reached this realm, he could be said to have transcended the real shackles of mortals. He could call the wind and summon the rain, go up to the sky, escape the earth, and have incredible power. As early as more than 20 days on the top of Heart-Cleansing Peak, Lin Sun had the opportunity to break through the realm at any time, but he held back and concentrated on understanding the complete general trend of the world. Now, although the battle with Lin Xiefeng made Lin Sun seriously injured and on the verge of collapse, it was precisely in this battle that Lin Sun's comprehension of the general trend of the world was tempered and verified. In the end, he couldn't bear it any more and stepped into the Sea Spirit Realm. And when he advanced, he triggered a strange phenomenon of the world. At this time, the promotion was not over. The light cyan rainbow descended from heaven was a mysterious and magnificent force, which carried out a rare baptism on Lin Sun. Boom! In the end, his body, soul, and all kinds of forces burst out and completely transformed. At this moment, Lin Sun felt that his body was about to explode. He couldn't help but roar to the sky. The roar was like a dragon and a tiger, shaking the 9 heavens. Bang, bang, bang! Under his feet, the ground cracked and collapsed inch by inch, spreading in all directions. Many people in the field were so shocked that they retreated again and again. On the opposite side of Lin Sun, Lin Xiefeng had long been dull, as if he had lost his soul. He was shocked by the magnificent scenes in front of him, and his mind went blank. After a long time, the sky returned to calm, the storm converged and gathered in Lin Sun's body. Then this area gradually calmed down. Strange phenomenon of the world, the great force of the world. Young Master's promotion is unique in the world. Lin Zhong looked excited and his eyes were shining. He couldn't help laughing. At this moment, his heart was in turmoil. He thought of his late master and mistress, the late direct clansman of Lin Clan, and the dark years of guarding Heart-Cleansing Peak alone for more than 10 years. Now, the appearance of young master made him see a ray of light.